Chapter 501, Soul Capture. Brave the wind and snow to reach the back entrance of the Weasley joke shop located at the entrance of the village. After opening the door with the key, a wind and snow rushed into the room together with them, blowing away the warmth of the room. Fortunately, after Ryan turned to close the door, the little magic on the door succeeded in isolating the cold air from the door. Sorry to keep you waiting for a while. Looking at Lupin who ran to meet him, Ryan said a little embarrassedly, before persuading Harry to spend a little more time. So they set off 5 or 6 minutes later than expected, plus the weather today made it difficult to make way, so when they arrived at the store, it was already about 10 minutes later than the agreed time. It's okay, Lupin said with a smile. The weather on the south side is worse. We waited a long time when we went to the fireplace in London after we arrived in London. We arrived at the store only 2 minutes ago. After complaining about the weather according to the habits of the British, they went to the alchemy laboratory hidden in the back room of the underground warehouse to start work. The 2 werewolves were already waiting inside. Walked into the laboratory and found that the new werewolf was much better than before. Although the dress was still simple, it was no longer as shabby as before. It seems that after they find a job, the whole person is much more energetic than before. After mastering the basic skills of treatment, this treatment becomes a proficiency. For example, it took 4 or 5 hours to give Lupin the first test because it was not proficient, and it only takes more than an hour to get it. And the time required today is shorter. The treatment of Ryan by the 2 people took only 100 minutes to complete. Look at how, Ryan asked the 2 werewolves he had just treated. The 2 werewolves immediately jumped off the treatment table and began to try to grasp the new changes in the body in a small space, while Lupin guided them on the side. It looks like you're getting more and more proficient. Hermione walked over to Ryan at this time and said that how fast this treatment can be done just now is also directly related to Hermione's help as an assistant. Of course, thanks to your help. Ryan took Hermione's hand and looked at her. Oh, where do we go in a while? I remember that there is a lounge upstairs. Let's go up for a hot drink. I really don't want to go out in this weather. After thinking about it, Hermione lost to the cold weather outside and decided to learn from her roommates. The same cat spent her free time on the sofa in front of the fireplace. Okay, you feel good? Ryan nodded. I remember last time I brought a large bottle of top-notch cocoa powder from a certain world. We can sit by the fireplace and drink some hot cocoa. It's much more comfortable blowing cold wind outside. By farewell to Lupin and the 2 werewolves who are now giant wolves. The 2 of them went through a dedicated staff staircase to a lounge built in the corner of the attic. After soaking the hot cocoa, they can finally rest for a while. Even if the treatment was just proficient, it is still not an easy task. After finishing the treatment, it still makes the whole body and spirit very tired. Holding hot cocoa by the fireplace, watching the wind and snow outside the window, and the lovers sitting back to back on the thick wool rug and chatting, it feels very good. Chatting and chatting, Ryan also opened up and talked about some things that have not been said before. Actually, when I graduated from elementary school, I made myself a plan for the second half of my life. I first took a good middle school, then went to a good university, and finally tried to make enough money for a lifetime before the age of 40. Of course, there is also a warm family. At that time, I thought that was the ultimate goal of my life. But now I have obtained far more than I prayed for. But why do I still feel more and more dissatisfied? What you thought was quite long-term, not like me, Hermione said with a chuckle. At that time my goal was just to be admitted to a good university, and then the university won first-class scholarships every year. As for you, it's normal for me to feel dissatisfied. As time changes, our ideals will naturally change. For example, I am thinking about changing the world and making this world better. If 5 or 6 years ago, this kind of thinking is absolutely arrogant. Okay, this is Xwibber. Ryan suddenly felt that his previous goal was a bit vulgar. However, Hermione thought that Ryan had more mature ideas than her, and felt that she was still naive. While the 2 were discussing their childhood dreams and enjoying the warm time now, they suddenly heard a vague quarrel in the wind. At first they didn't want to care about it, but as the quarrel grew louder they could only put their glasses down and stand up, and walk to the window to see what happened. Turned out to be Katie Bell and her friend standing on the road and arguing, and the place of quarrel was just under the window of their lounge in Lane. After opening the window, as the snowflakes drifted into the window, the 2 girls who became clear quarreled. Oh dear Katie, you have been holding this bag as soon as you came out of the toilet with 3 brooms. Then you walked straight out of the bar without even calling me. Are you cursed? The girl named Linny said anxiously. And the thing in your hand is unknown. How can you take it to the castle? Don't care. Katie pushed her friend Linny, and then said, this has nothing to do with you, Linny. I will take it to the castle to a very important person. Hearing the conversation between the 2, Lane thought of Malfoy's first terrorist attack on Hogwarts. He immediately said to Hermione that I thought the girl might have gotten the soul spell and ran downstairs. And Hermione froze for a moment and ran immediately after him. When the 2 rushed under the window of the lounge just now, Ryan saw that the 2 girls were trying to compete for a small package. He immediately released the 2 girls separated from the left and right, and then released the disarming spell at Katie. The package flew straight up 5 or 6 feet from Katie's hand, and then fell to the ground with a snap. Because the package was made of paper, it shattered immediately after contacting the muddy ground, revealing something green inside. Katie screamed and wanted to pick up the thing, but Hermione quickly launched a fast imprisonment to fix her. Why are you attacking us? Lily only responded at this time, asking with a trembling voice as Ryan and Hermione watched her friend with wide eyes. We just heard your quarrel in the Weasley joke shop. www.mplnovel.com. Lane thinks your friend's situation is very similar to the reaction of the soul-taking spell introduced in the brochure written by the Ministry of Magic, so we come down take a look. After waiting to find out that the two of you used magic after pulling because they were worried about the two of you, Hermione explained to Lily, who seemed overwhelmed. Oh, no, she must have got the soul retrieval curse, which I didn't realize at the time. I should have thought of 3 brooms after hearing Hermione's explanation. Lindsay responded, bending down and covering his mouth with his hands, sobbing. After handing Katie, who was temporarily unable to move, to Lily, Ryan walked to the edge of the broken package. It turned out that the original package contained a gorgeous opal necklace. He swiftly found a gold-plated lead box with a sealed circle from the space bag, and then used magic to float the necklace and put the necklace into the box. Because Lupin had taken 2 werewolves away while they were taking a break before Ryan, they could only go to the castle for help now. After a little tidying up, the 4 men proceeded to the castle, except that Katie was floated away with magic. Before leaving, Lane called out his own patron saint of crabs to let him speak to Professor McGonagall. When they walked to the wrought iron gate of the school, they found that Professor McGonagall was standing here waiting for them in the rain and snow. Chapter 502, Solve the Problem. Professor McGonagall. Seeing the aged Professor McGonagall's hat and shoulders covered with a thin layer of snowflakes, Ryan immediately stepped forward to say hello. But the professor was interrupted before he had finished speaking. It's not time to say hello. Bring Miss Katie with me. After Professor McGonagall turned around neatly and walked across the field towards the castle, Ryan and they looked at each other and quickly followed. Thankfully, at this time, most students were either in Hogsmeade or in the castle due to the weather, and there was no one on the ground. Otherwise Katie floating in the air would definitely cause panic. After coming to the school hospital and putting Katie on the bed, Madame Pomfrey came out of the office. Milva, what is this kid? Lane said she seemed to be in a spell of seizure. Professor McGonagall briefly explained the current situation, and Madame Pomfrey's expression immediately became serious after hearing it. She immediately pulled out her wand and whispered a mantra, and then a twist of smoke appeared on Katie's forehead. It's indeed a soul-spelling curse. It's a pitiful girl. Mrs. Pomfrey grunted and walked into the office. After a while, she took out a small bottle of sky blue potion and came out to drink it for Katie. The curse on tea. It's better than imagined. The man who used the soul dancing charm is not skilled. After taking the nourishing medicine just now and taking a good sleep, I think she should be fine. That's good. Professor McGonagall and Ryan both breathed a sigh of relief, after which they were taken into their office by Professor McGonagall. The window glass splashed with rain and snow clicked in the window frame, and despite the crackling fire in the grate, the room was still cold. Professor McGonagall closed the door, walked around the table and sat down, then looked at them and said, "Speak, what is going on?" Linny stammered. Because there was a pause several times in the middle of the tension. She told Professor McGonagall how Katie went to the toilet at the 3 broom bars, and when she came back, she looked a little weird, holding the unmarked package in her hand. How did the two of them quarrel because she thought Katie it should not be agreed to hand over an unknown thing? In the end, how did Ryan and Hermione use the spell to quickly control the two of them? Okay. Professor McGonagall's expression slowed down and said in a gentle tone, "Linny, you can go to rest now. I think a good night's sleep will help you recover. If you still feel uncomfortable, you can get some medicine from Madame Pomfrey." After Linny left, Professor McGonagall looked at Ryan and Hermione. "What did you two just discover?" Lynn said that they heard the quarrel between Linny and Katie when they were dating. They looked out of curiosity and found out that Katie seemed to have a soul-taking spell, and finally took her back to the castle. After recounting the whole process, Ryan put a lead box on the desk. This is what Katie was released from the soul-spelling curse, and the person who attacked her asked her to bring her into the castle. "What's inside? Have you checked?" Professor McGonagall asked after putting on his glasses. "A gorgeous silver necklace with opals on it." Lane opened the box and let the necklace come out. "However, there is a fatal curse on it. Whether the necklace is worn around the neck or just picking it up with a gloved hand will kill the victim on the spot. In addition, there is a temptation magic on the necklace that can seduce people to go touch it. Fortunately, I stopped her when she was about to pick up the necklace with her hand." "God, Ryan, I can only say that you did a great job with Hermione this time." Professor McGonagall's tone was full of luck. "If this necklace is found during the back-to-school inspection, then it will be in the foyer. Everyone in here will be in danger of life. I want to add 30 points to you and Hermione." "Thank you, Professor. By the way, this necklace," Ryan asked Professor McGonagall, who was planning to write on the parchment. "I'll give it to Professor Snape in a moment. Do you have any ideas?" Professor McGonagall raised her head and stared at Ryan with her stern eyes, as if to see something conspiracy from Ryan's face. Same. This necklace is very useful to me, mainly because the compound curse formed by the black magic on this necklace is very valuable. I can develop targeted defensive alchemy props based on the research results of the above black magic. Ryan explained to Professor McGonagall seriously. Sorry, Ryan, I can't give you this thing. Professor McGonagall thought to Ryan, after all, you are now in the castle and there are so many classmates around you. For safety reasons, you hold this item is not very suitable. This sentence made Ryan a little depressed, because he could not tell Professor McGonagall that he had a space. But Professor McGonagall also saw Ryan's frustration. She smiled and comforted, of course, Ryan. You can go to Sirius's house on Christmas break. I'll let Professor Snape take this thing with me. In the past, you can study this necklace there. Yes, then thank you. Ryan adjusted his emotions and bowed slightly to Professor McGonagall, then left Hermione's office with Hermione. It was exactly lunchtime, and the two simply went downstairs to lunch in the auditorium. Ryan, who do you think will be responsible for this attack today? Hermione scooped out half of her curry and seafood soup with a spoon and asked Ryan. Not easy to say. Ryan swallowed the roasted chicken in his mouth, frowning and said, but I think it is most likely to be done by a Death Eater hidden in school. Why? Hermione asked strangely, and she wanted to know what Ryan made based on. Because this attack is too naive. It really does not seem to be done by an experienced Death Eater. Ryan concluded. A truly experienced Death Eater cannot use a completely unskilled soul retrieval curse to have a person bring this dangerous substance into the school because the paper bag can't pass the inspection at the school entrance. What about random terrorist attacks? Hermione asked, such as causing panic or something. No, although the mysterious person may feel emotionally unstable after slicing his soul, and will produce many abnormal ideas. But after summing up, you can find that all the previous attacks are purposeful. And as long as Professor Dumbledore is in school sitting here, this rough attack is just a joke. He will not invest so much resources to do something that is too small for him. Is there a lot of resources invested in this attack? Hermione asked, puzzled. It's just that you lost a black magic necklace. Isn't it just a black magic necklace? Ryan looked at Hermione. www.mtlnovel.com. You can't think this kind of thing is very common because I am good at making magic props. For example, this necklace. I once turned it. I saw it in the Bojan bookstore when I was down the alley. It was worth 1,500 gallons. Well, this is indeed a huge investment. Hermione admits this. In the magic world where 1,000 gallons can be a shop in Diagon Alley, 1,500 gallons is definitely a big number. So, who would pay such a big price to carry out an attack that is basically destined to be meaningless? It should be a rich and inexperienced person. Ryan said decisively. It is very likely that Death Eaters have to do something to prove themselves before joining the group. Someone with a lot of money will use this method to pass. How does it sound like Malfoy? Hermione said with a smile, but she smiled after watching Ryan's serious expression. You don't think it's really him? Did this kill an innocent person at random? Is Malfoy so bad? It's possible, Ryan reminded. Think about what happened to Harry on the train and what he heard. Don't forget Malfoy, who was born in a pure-blood family, and his father needed him to support the whole family after he went to prison. Damn it. Hermione opened her mouth wide and didn't know what to say, and finally she could only spit out a crude word like event. Chapter 503, Busy. Katie came out of the school hospital the next day, and the news that she was attacked on 3 brooms before her discharge was spread throughout the school. Regrettably, in her memory, she was controlled by a soul-draining curse as soon as she opened the bathroom door. The only thing I can remember is that the voice of the person who controls her is the voice of a little girl. Information with no reference value. This is Ryan's evaluation. A person who can buy the 1,500-gallon curse necklace will certainly be able to buy a compound decoction, and even if it becomes a little girl, it is difficult to cause the doubts of others. After listening to this sentence, Harry nodded again and again. He still thought that Malfoy was going to make a conspiracy this year, and Ryan's conjecture about the attack perfectly matched his thinking. I said long ago that Malfoy is now a Death Eater. But seriously, we don't need to know who Malfoy is now, but we need to figure out what conspiracy he is going to school this year. Speaking of which, Ryan looked at Harry. So, you were still a little impulsive before. Now Malfoy looks very vigilant. Even if we work hard, it is difficult to track what he is doing recently. When the time came to Monday, Principal Dumbledore asked Harry to continue to his class in his office. In the herbal medicine class on the second day, while everyone was dealing with the scarred and prickly vines, Harry told Ryan they told the memory that Professor Dumbledore had brought him before. Wow, what a horror, mysterious man in his youth. Ron said softly, but I still don't understand. Why did Dumbledore show you this? I mean, it's interesting, but what is it? Use it? Of course it makes sense, Ryan replied. He had just cooperated with Hermione at this time to take out a grapefruit-sized pulsating poppy from the remnants of the pimple, which looked extremely disgusting. But before he answered, a voice came from far and near. It's beautiful, Professor Sprout said loudly. She hurried over to praise Ryan and Hermione, and then looked at Harry and their group. You are behind. Other classmates have started. Some people have already got a pod. Harry, they can only deal with the plants in front of them. Ron just stretched out his hand, and the long thorn vines jumped from the top, flicked in the air, and even caught his clothes. And Harry had planned to take this opportunity to reach out and pull out the pods in the tree hole. As a result, when he reached in and caught his elbow by the mouth of the tree hole, the two of them could only do their best to fight the plant. Dragging desperately, twisting the vines reduced the pressure on Harry's hands. "How did you do it?" Ron shouted at the Nitrian in his body in a hurry. www.mplnovel.com Carnivorous tree Daquan said that the sound of a certain frequency can make the trees quiet for a while. Ryan said he knocked a tuning fork with his wand. Ron found that the tuning fork was engraved with several runes by Ryan. "I prepared in advance when I was preparing." After that, Ryan and Hermione cooperated to take out the sixth pod from the basically immobile knot vine hole. "Alchemist is simply cheating." Ron broke the tree hole with helpless face, finally got their first pod. By this time Ryan had already squeezed the pods. Hermione appeared a slender three-sided dagger. I saw that she held the dagger quickly and pointed it out. Every shot punctured the pod perfectly. Quickly, the bowl was full of creepy little pimples like light green caterpillars. When he returned to the castle after this lesson, Ron asked Ryan, "The thing just said in the class has not been finished yet." "Why do you think it makes sense for Harry to see the story of the mysterious man in his youth?" As soon as his voice fell, Ryan discovered that Harry had also come over and listened. After glancing at Harry, Ryan said seriously, "The mysterious man and Harry are the enemies of their lives. If Harry wants to defeat the demon, he must be well prepared. To understand your opponent thoroughly is to prepare an indispensable link." Speaking of which, Ryan looked at some disapproving Harry and asked, "Harry, what do you know about the mysterious man?" "Except that he is a powerful black magician and an enemy of your life. The principal Dumbledore gave you before class. Do you know anything else, such as the hobby, habits, and tone of the mysterious person?" "Sorry, I don't understand." After thinking for a while, Harry's expression became serious because he found out that he really knew nothing about Voldemort, as Ryan said. After being awakened by Ryan, a sense of shame rushed directly into his mind, making his entire face flushed. "Harry, are you okay?" Ron asked worriedly, watching Harry's face flushed like a fever. "It's okay." Harry shook his hand. "I just think that I haven't done enough in some places before. Since I'm going to fight Voldemort, I don't know anything about him like I do now. I will definitely take Principal Dumbledore's class seriously in the future." "Yes, Voldemort killed me because he heard half of the prophecy and didn't understand the specific situation, and he was killed by the life reflection. So now Voldemort has become more cautious, and because of this, he will die before." The apprentices went to the Ministry of Magic to the prophecy ball, which can be seen that he is trying to understand me thoroughly and then kill me. "And if I want to defeat him, I must really understand him. But he cannot understand me now, and I bet he knew nothing about him." The next few days, Harry seemed very busy, because he needs to integrate his new Gryffindor Quidditch team. Ryan tried to make some new magic props. Although the necklace was taken away by Professor McGonagall last time, on the way to school, Ryan used the help of the rune on the box to figure out what the curse of death was going on. Now, Ryan tries to incorporate this magic into some of his aggressive alchemy props. But the first step is to find some kind of anti-curse, otherwise it will be miserable if the friendly army is hurt by mistake. So while Harry and Ron were sweating on the Quidditch stadium during this time, Ryan and Hermione were busy working in the alchemy laboratory to create defensive props that could withstand the effects of death. On the night before the first game of the semester, Ryan finally made new defense props. Of course, this is inseparable from Hermione's help. After she began to learn the rules of death, their analysis of this kind of things that contain the power of death became much simpler than before. "Is your new work easy to use?" Hermione looked suspiciously at the bracelet in Ryan's hand while standing next to the alchemy table, because in her eyes this bracelet looked nothing like the gold defense bracelets that Ryan had made before. "The difference? Of course it is," Ryan replied proudly, "although it looks a lot like an old product. I added a rune of anti-mortality magic inlaid with mithril, at least to that level of rune on the necklace that day." "No problem. www.mplnovel.com As long as you bring a bracelet, even if you keep the necklace on your neck all the time." "It sounds good." Ryan Hermione, who was showing off like a proud cock, teased, "Can you tell me how much this thing costs?" "The cost price is at least 850 gallons, because mithril is too expensive, but other materials can't achieve such a good effect." This problem embarrassed Ryan, so he quickly shifted the topic. "Of course, this is an experimental product for our own use in the future. Naturally, we must choose the best material. I will optimize this later." "That's good." Hermione nodded and said, "Oh, can you give me your pair of death claw puppets?" Ryan said nothing, opened the space door, and took 2 slapped obsidian statues from the grocery store and handed them to Hermione, and then asked, "I remember I made you a giant puppet, originally to protect security. As a result, I didn't expect us to grow so fast. This thing is not much useful to us now, but I still keep them for commemoration." "Yes, what do you want this thing to do?" "I want to try to use the power of death to reform these things again. Maybe the waste can be reused," Hermione said after taking the puppet. "Okay, we should go to have a good dinner. These 2 days are really too busy." and the meals are not good. Chapter 504, Game. When eating early the next morning, through the enchanted ceiling of the auditorium, the sky was clear, blue and cloudless, which is good news, because it is lighter but more flexible than Slytherin. The Gryffindor Quidditch players are more likely to use their advantages in such weather. The atmosphere in the auditorium is also as good as the weather outside. At the long table of Gryffindor and the long table of Slytherin, the Quidditch team uniforms have been worn in advance, but players who have not yet equipped with protective gear are enjoying take your own breakfast and replenish your strength for the upcoming competition. Of course, enjoying breakfast only refers to the state of the vast majority of people. For example, after Ryan sat down in an empty seat, he realized that Ron was sitting there with a pale face. His eyes were indifferent, and the knife and fork unconsciously crossed between the plates, and Harry placed a glass of milk from a jug on the table next to Ron. "What's wrong with Ron?" Ryan asked when he approached Harry. "I heard others in the courtyard say he was okay when he was training." "Most of the time." Harry nodded helplessly. "But last night's training was worse last night. The top of the catcher catch 1/3 more. He also told me to withdraw from the team." In short, he can save any ball when he is in good shape, but people who are nothing when they are in poor condition. After listening to this, Ryan glanced worriedly at Ron, who almost poured milk into his nose. "Well, I think his condition is not only bad, but very bad." Harry's expression collapsed at once. "Do you have any way to help him?" "Anyway, I have no other choice. I have been trying to unblock him since I got up, but to no avail." "Harry, whether it's a potion or a spell, I have a way to make Ron's emotions soar." Ryan continued looking at the hope in Harry's eyes. "But these are all exceptions to the methods banned by the Quidditch game rules." But what?" Harry asked eagerly. "This is his first game since becoming captain of the Gryffindor team, and he must not lose. Especially he used to be Ron as a goalkeeper. Once this game fails, he will definitely bear the responsibility of cronyism to bring down a team. So what Ryan said looks like a life-saving straw for him. He subconsciously wants to seize it. "There is a mull solution here. I think I can try it," Ryan said, touching his chin. "In advance, I cannot guarantee that my approach will be completely useful, only that it will not be worse than it is now even if it is useless." "That's good, that's good." Harry smiled. "Do you need any help?" "No," said Ron, who walked across the long table and was drinking milk. "Ron, I think you are a little nervous, but I have a way to make you not nervous. Do you want to try it?" "It's useless. I lost today." "This game is definitely my last game," Ron said with frustration, but was quickly interrupted by Ryan. "How can you know if I can't do it without trying?" "Don't forget, I'm an alchemist." "But it is illegal to use potions or magic in the game." Hermione appeared next to Ryan at this time. "Aren't you trying to break the rules? If you win like this, you won't have a soul." "Of course not." Ryan turned his head to explain to Hermione. He regretted that he took Hermione to the world of Twilight a while ago, and after 2 months of going online, Hermione now understands the stalk more than normal people know. In the mid-1990s, the method I use does not require any magic, Lane said vowedly. After he finished, he took a gold pocket watch from his arms and said to Ron, "Now relax and stare at my watch. This is a long-established mull trick, and I promise to solve the problem you are facing now." "Hypnosis?" Hermione realized suddenly, and several nearby wizards who noticed here also showed a clear expression. "What are you going to do?" Ron asked anxiously, especially when he saw several students around seeing Ryan's approach and nodding and smiling. "This is a treatment used by people who are not magic, and it works well for people with excessive nervousness." Colin Creevy added at this time. "I have seen hypnosis in hospitals to treat excessive stress or sequelae of battlefields, and I heard that the effect is good." "That's good." After that, Ron looked at the gold watch, while Ryan murmured at a rhythm in a soft tone. "You can relax. You will be able to stop the ball." 10 minutes later, Ron's eyes straightened into a state of half sleeping and half waking, when Ryan put away his pocket watch and snapped his fingers in front of his eyes. Ron woke up immediately. "I feel it's not like it was just now." Ron woke up and touched his chest before raising his voice to the people around him. "I think I can do it this time." "Cheer up, Ron," Lavender shouted next to him. "I know you must be great." "Thank you." Scarlet slowly returned to Ron's face. He waved to Lavender, then turned his head to smile and said to Ryan, "Thank you, buddy. I feel my condition is great now." "It seems that your hypnosis effect was good just now," Hermione said to Ryan sitting on the side of the stadium to the side. At this time, the game has been going on for more than 10 minutes. Ron easily saved one ball after another on the court. It was almost in hand, and there was a smile on his face, and he even pretended to give them command from a height even when everyone was singing and cheering him over there. Even before Zachariah said in prejudiced language that he had not affected his state, Weasley rescued the ball again. www.mplnovel.com. Yeah. When there is always good luck. Zacharias uttered contemplative words at the microphone and Ryan frowned. I feel that a commentary cannot be so prejudiced. Not to mention that it is basically a personal attack now. Finally, 10 minutes later, Harper first discovered the golden thief against the bright blue sky. When Harper was about to catch the golden thief, Harry's hand was a few feet away from the golden thief. Fortunately, Harry quickly asked Harper a question about Malfoy and surprised him, causing him to fail to catch the thief, and the ball slipped out of his fingers. Harry took advantage of this opportunity to rush towards the fluttering ball and grabbed it. Then he turned and rushed to the ground quickly, holding the thief high in his hand. Today's game is really good. Watching the center of the court squeeze the Gryffindor team around, rushing forward to hug Harry and kiss him, Ginny Lane said with a smile. This war is destined to take a long time, and a positive attitude is the best weapon to fight Voldemort's Black Terror. When the Gryffindor Quidditch team walked out of the locker room and walked towards the castle, many people shouted and congratulated them. This is not only to celebrate their victory in the game, but also because the recent news is getting more and more suppressed. Everyone wants to use this excuse to relax. Chapter 505, Adventure. On the evening after the game, Gryffindor students held a celebration party in their common room. Even if the twins have graduated and left school, but the spirit of trouble they left behind has been passed down in Gryffindor. For example, even if the situation outside is so tense, the tables in the common room are still full of snacks. In addition, there are dozens of butterbeers. Where did you get this from? Ryan asked Cormac McLagan, who provided a butterbeer bottle to supply the party today. I remember the wind outside was very tight now, and the secret passages in the school that used to get out of the castle should no longer be used. McLagan was very pleased that someone could ask him. He raised his chest and said proudly, "That's because I know a few who are patrolling around, so just pay for a drink. They are very willing to help me bring these things from the town of Hogsmeade next to me. Hard work for you." Ryan didn't mind saying good things at this time. "Thanks to your help, today's party looks much more lively." Soon Ryan found Hermione, who was chatting with Ginny. After a while, Harry also came over with a handful of snacks. "Ah, the students are so enthusiastic. I finally squeezed out of them." "What about my stupid brother?" Ginny asked when he took a sugar quill from Harry. "I didn't see him at the beginning of the celebration. I don't know where he went." "Well, isn't it over there?" Harry pointed to a corner. Ron and Lavender Brown were kissing over there in front of the restroom. The students next to them whistled and applauded. Sound. "My brother's kissing technique seems to require a lot of practice." Ginny shrugged. "After all, he hasn't kissed any other except our Aunt Muriel." Listening to Ron was miserable, Ryan thought. But now it seems that he finally began to have a feeling of salted fish turning over. When the next day's class break, Harry teased Ron. "How did it feel to be with Lavender yesterday?" "Ryan and I saw you standing there and kissing yesterday." "Seriously, your kissing skills are too poor, like you are nibbling the girl's face." "That's what you said. Ryan shouldn't be so boring." Ron knew what this was all about. "My old girl must have told you my previous black history. It should sound very stupid, but I now find that feeling in love is really great." Ron looked nervous as he watched Harry froze there. "I mean, Ryan and Hermione are together. You are with my elder sister. I used to stand alone with you, always feel weird. Now I finally found Lavender. She is a good girl. I feel happy with her." "So, brother, congratulations on finding the person you like." Harry patted Ron's shoulder and looked around. But where did Ryan and Hermione go again? After the beginning of this semester, when they didn't have class, they couldn't find them both. "I think they might have gone to the alchemy laboratory." 2 days ago Ginny told me that she heard Hermione say that Ryan got the key to the Hogwarts alchemy laboratory this semester, so they just go there as soon as they have time. Research. Ron thought for a moment and told Harry what Ginny had told him. "No wonder the two of them can get together." Harry sighed with emotion. "I know. It is estimated that the two of them are busy with their stuff in the laboratory now, and in the letter to me from Sirius 2 days ago, they said that those members of the Phoenix Society recently obtained a lot of useful alchemy props. I guess this is what the two of them have been busy with recently." Most of Harry and Ron's guesses were correct, but they were completely wrong about what they were doing now. Because of Ryan, Hermione and Rose Crystal are now standing in an alley in a foreign country. They had already digested the gains of other worlds before, and this afternoon there was no class. So after the morning class, under the advice of Lane, the two decided to start a trip to the new world. So they left the castle as soon as they left the classroom door after class, and then went deep into the Forbidden Forest a little bit to confirm that no one found them, and went directly to the Wanji grocery store. Then Ryan invested 64 offset points to open a new world. After crossing the space door, they appeared in a dirty alley. I can see people at first sight." After seeing the outside scene, the Rose Crystal floating next to Ryan in a state of stealth from outsiders said happily. "After the new world entered, I saw either grass or woods, and even finding someone takes more than half a day. But the problem is that there are too many people in this place now. It may not be easy to find the person we want to find." Ryan seemed helpless. "Oh, who knows where is here?" "Cairo." And it was Cairo from the end of the 19th century to the beginning of the 20th century. Rose Crystal floated up 5 or 6 meters and looked around, then floated down and said to Ryan, "How do you know?" Hermione was surprised, because it was not a simple matter to come to a strange place to determine the location and year of the foothold in such a short time. "It's easy," Rose Crystal said to Hermione, "because I saw a large river running through the city to the west, and 3 huge pyramids farther west of the river, then the city at our feet must be Cairo. As for time, The classic cars running around the street are probably let me in further time of appearance. It sounds great. Ryan praised Rose Crystal. At this time, he probably could judge that this should be a world related to ancient Egypt, but the specific one is not clear. However, no matter which world it is difficult to bypass the mummy as long as it is related to Egypt. This means that I can get a lot of death-related knowledge from here, which is very helpful for Hermione to digest the law of death at hand. So where do we go first? Hermione asked. Isn't it so easy to find something in such a huge city? Yeah, so I think we should first go to the nearby library or museum. Because this is Egypt, the real good things should come from ancient times rather than modern times. After speaking, Ryan took Hermione to the street. Fortunately, because of local customs, the two of them wore hoods and robes and few people noticed them. Through inquiries and explorations, they knew that it was 1923, and they also figured out the location of the largest Cairo history museum in the country. I think we can find what we want in a museum, Hermione said after discovering the current year. Historically, in February of this year, Tutankhamun's cemetery was discovered, and now you can definitely see a lot of good things in the museum. It's okay. www.mtlnovel.com. We have time to watch slowly, Ryan said. If you want, we can also go to the scene of the Imperial Valley. After all, it took so much energy to run here. I will definitely accompany you to read everything you want to see, Lane said, holding Hermione's arm. After a short distance west, they came to the Nile. The Nile River flows slowly like a golden ribbon under the sunlight, and along the Nile River, they soon saw the Cairo History Museum by the river. This museum is large in scale and the entire building is a Victorian antique Roman-style building. Looks magnificent. As they walked into the museum, they saw two tall statues of ancient Egyptian soldiers on either side of the museum door. Unlike those antique sculptures of later generations, these two huge statues are truly antiques. The grade of this museum was highlighted at once, but although the museum was magnificent, Ryan did not see a few people here. Think about it too. It is the 1920s. In this era, how could there be so many people in this semi-colonial country like Egypt who have the money and leisure to come to this place? Not to mention that this is the time for disputes between Egypt and the United Kingdom, and violence has appeared in many places. As a result, the museum is no longer visited. But this just happened to Ryan and they walked into the museum, holding hands. Chapter 506, Heroine. After stepping into the gate of the museum, the surrounding air suddenly became cooler. Because Egypt has a dry desert climate, the place where the sun cannot shine directly is much cooler than the place where the sun can shine. Of course, this kind of coolness also made Ryan feel refreshed, and the whole person has a lot of spirit. After stepping into the gate, a local security guard wearing a red hat came out and appeared to want to stop the two. But after Hermione put down her hood and said in English that she wanted to visit, she backed away. After all, Egypt is still under British control, so the other party returned after seeing that they were British. Maybe it is because it is hot noon, or because there are really not many people who love ancient Egyptian civilization this year. There is no one in the museum now, plus a large number of ancient Egyptian sculptures, wooden coffins and even mummies in the dim hall. At this time, the mummy was placed in the open air, not in the glass cabinet like the posterity, so the whole hall looks like a large cemetery, which makes people feel a cold air blowing in the face. However, as wizards, Ryan and they were not afraid, but they still pulled out their wands and held them in their hands. But unlike the common plot in horror movies, no mummy uncovered the coffin at this time. They walked smoothly through the lobby to the place that looked like an office area behind. There is nothing we want in these places, Hermione said after crossing the hall, as she is now learning to master the rules of death. It is obvious that the mummies in the hall are just simple mummies, not them. I want to find the kind with extraordinary strength. But I found something interesting. After speaking, Hermione turned and waved her wand at a painted wooden coffin with mummy, and a man's scream came from the coffin. Fortunately, at this time, a loud noise from the office collapsed completely covering the man's scream. What the hell? Ryan took his wand and walked to the coffin where screaming had just arrived. He found out a man in a beige suit looked awkward and was pressed by the mummy that Hermione had just activated with the breath of death. Underneath, the mummy under the control of Hermione took advantage of the man's open mouth to scream while closing his entire arm in the man's mouth, which is why Ryan only heard a scream. Is it a fashion to run into the coffin and sleep with the mummy now? Ryan quipped at the scene in the coffin. I only know that there are mummies in London pharmacies in this era. It should have nothing to do with this. Hermione came over. It's like a prank. We let him out and asked to know. After that, Hermione waved her wand and let the mummy let go of the man, but surprisingly, this man did not jump out of the coffin. It seems to be dizzy. Ryan put his finger under the man's nose and probed. We'll get him out first. Soon the man was pulled out of the coffin by Ryan with a floating spell. And then Ryan pointed his face with his wand and said recover quickly. A few seconds later the man woke up with a moan. Opening his eyes, the man wanted to scream, but Hermione's eyes quickly fixed a silent spell. I only saw the middle-aged man open his mouth in surprise after closing the spell, and then looked at Ryan with terrified eyes. Okay, we are not bad guys, there is something to ask you. If you are willing to cooperate, nod your head and don't shout, otherwise, said Ryan, gestured to Hermione with her eyes, and Hermione waved intentionally. Wand. All the mummies around her were instantly activated by her at once. Under the control of the Death Force, the mummies moved and started performing sit-ups in the coffin. This scene almost stunned the middle-aged man, but when watching the two of them point the little wooden stick at themselves, an agitated reaction immediately nodded desperately. After the spell was lifted, Ryan and they understood what the middle-aged man was all about in a few words. His name is Jonathan, because he recently got a baby, so he wants to show it to his younger sister, Evelyn, who is proficient in ancient Egyptian culture, hoping to make her happy. So that's the thing? Hermione carried an octagonal metal copper box in her hands and looked closely at the dim torches around. It's a bit of a magical reaction, but it's not a magical prop. It's like being contaminated from something with a magical reaction or a space rich in magic. But this is indeed a good thing, Ryan said, looking at the box. As a person with a lot of mechanical knowledge, he could easily find the organ above the box. After gently pulling a protruding place on the side of the box, the lid opened like the same flower, revealing a small piece of papyrus folded into a small piece. Let me see, this seems to be a map. Hermione leaned in and said, Hamnata? How do I get to Hamnata on the map? But the question is, where is Hamnata? Hamnata? Are you talking about Hamnata? The undead city of Hamnata is said to be a treasure trove of early pharaohs. The voice of a young woman came from behind, and Jonathan heard the sound so good everyone was tense. He shouted loudly, Evelyn, run, run. What? Evelyn froze for a moment, but as soon as she reacted and prepared to escape, Hermione moved directly to her in front of her and stopped her way. Afterwards, with the help of the body restraint spell, Ryan they finally let their brother and sister quietly listen to Ryan's explanation. Sorcerer and witch. Unlike Jonathan, who was terrified, Evelyn seemed very excited. So there is a supernatural power of magic in this world, right? It means that whether it is the City of Death, Hammer Tower, or the Sun Sutra, which contains all the secret spells of ancient Egypt, should it exist? Well, we're not so sure, Ryan said, looking at Evelyn in front of her with a look of hope. But because we are not so sure, we only came here to try to find the book that is still talking, and now, we have found the most important evidence of that magical place. After finishing, Ryan handed the map he just found. Past. Look, the floral decoration on the monument of this map is the royal seal of Seti I, and these words. Next, Evelyn said a lot of very professional archaeological terms. www.mtlnovel.com. Ryan found that he didn't even know about 1/10 of these things. He glanced at Hermione helplessly, and found that Hermione was also binocular, unable to understand what the person in front was saying. That, who is Seti I? Jonathan asked the first question. The second pharaoh of the 19th dynasty of ancient Egypt. In his hand, ancient Egypt defeated the surrounding countries and maintained a strong empire. Evelyn looked at her brother with a bit of hatred. You look like someone who has lost her parents now. I really don't understand why you haven't inherited their strengths. Don't say that, my dear sister, Jonathan said with a hippie smile. At least I know there must be a lot of gold and silver jewelry in this Hamnata. We don't have any interest in those jewels at all, Ryan said. This is indeed his truth. Now Ryan may lack something else, but there is absolutely no shortage of worldly wealth. Not to mention the countless treasures gained in the previous adventures of various worlds. Even now Ryan has continuously provided him with wealth in the other countries of other worlds. But as wizards, we very much want to get books that record ancient Egyptian magic. In this case, let's organize an expedition to set off, Evelyn said happily. Chapter 507, Hurry Up. After making the decision to go to Hamnata, a very real question lay before them. Where did the money for the team come from? We need camels, horses, supplies, weapons, tents. There is a whole lot of stuff, but our brothers and sisters don't have that much money, Jonathan said frankly. In short, if we don't have enough money, we may have to recruit others. For example, the curator of this museum, or some rich people I know. But in this way, our harvest must be greatly reduced, and the danger is greatly increased. Money. This is easy to say. Ryan pulled out a few gold bars from the space bag. We don't have the pounds here. Can gold be used? You can take the gold for preparation, and the rest will be used as a tip for you. My only request is for you to buy the most suitable equipment as quickly as possible. Of course, no problem. I'm familiar with this place in Cairo, and I promise you to do it properly. Jonathan kissed the gold bar, then greeted his sister with a big swing, and left to prepare. Oh, you are too generous. There is really no need to give so much money. Evelyn looked at Ryan and said, just so much gold was enough to organize a luxuriously equipped, dozen-person expedition. It doesn't matter, there is more money, and the speed of doing things should be faster. Moreover, this money is not very important to us. What really matters is the ancient knowledge of ancient Egyptian magic left in the ruins. Lane said. The following time, Ryan and Hermione helped Evelyn to quickly clean up the library she had just messed up with magic. and then went to a nice hotel with her to wait for Jonathan to prepare. As expected, Hermione and Evelyn soon found a common language and chatted. Evelyn began to teach Hermione some archaeological knowledge about ancient Egypt. Fortunately, Hermione had a foundation of ancient Egyptian scriptures, so she learned quickly. In the afternoon, Jonathan came to the hotel and told them to leave. Unlike the imaginary journey of riding a camel, Jonathan prepared a steamboat trip on the Nile. Know that the ancient Egyptian civilization developed around the Nile, so their important cities are on both sides of the Nile, and the place we are going to is no exception. Jonathan quickly explained to Ryan's puzzled eyes, so I'm looking at after crossing the map, I think we can take the boat first, and then ride over. This is not only fast, but also a lot more comfortable. It's okay, you can come as convenient as you think. In fact, if only Ryan and Hermione would choose to fly directly over. However, considering that neither of them understood ancient Egyptian culture very much, in order to avoid various troubles in the ruins, bringing Evelyn into a good option. In this way, Jonathan, the uneasy sister who was an older brother, went out for adventure with two strangers, and insisted on following. Fortunately, as a person who eats in various places in Cairo, bringing him can also provide a lot of help for the journey. Although the boat they took was just an inland watercraft, it was not small. After the luggage was settled, Ryan and Hermione went to the deck together to enjoy the view on both sides of the river. It really feels like in an old movie, Hermione said, leaning on the boat railing. An old steam inland river vessel sailing on the beautiful Nile River in the sunshine. Is that movie called The Massacre on the Nile? Ryan thought for a moment before coming up with what kind of movie Hermione was talking about. Hermione chuckled and smiled, when a young white man who looked like a European came over. This beautiful lady, could you please go to the bar on the ship for a drink? Sorry, my fiancé and I have something to say here, Hermione said to the nonchalant guy annoyed. However, instead of leaving, this guy started to speak loudly. Get out of the way, chink, stay away from this white lady. Damn racism. Ryan clenched her wand in her pocket. Seriously, this is also the first time he has faced such direct racist discrimination in so many years. The elementary school he attended before was a private school with a relatively high grade. At most, racial discrimination was a very secret expression. After graduating from elementary school, he went directly to Hogwarts. Since black magic and East Asia are no weaker than the West in the magic world, there is no racial discrimination in the magic world, only bloodline discrimination. Hermione was very angry with such remarks, and she directly settled this guy with petrochemical. Afterwards, he pointed his wand at the other person's face in his horrified eyes. Dementing. Soon the expression on Hermione's face grew more and more angry, and finally a trace of murderous intentions revealed in her eyes. What's the matter? Are you okay? Ryan asked, pressing Hermione's shoulder. This guy is a member of the 3K party and has participated in 5 to 6 killings of innocent people of color. Hermione turned her head and said to Ryan, in addition to this, he has more people against people of color. The injury, this time he and a group of 3K party scum similar to him. As a bodyguard to protect a scholar looking for Hamnata, Ryan suddenly thought that this group of Americans should be the group of guys in the original plot who took Han Solo's visceral holy urn. Think about it too. There are not many people who can take the initiative to go to such dangerous places in this era. Good people. And at the same time it is now the most rampant era of the 3K party. Then it's normal for this group of people to kill innocent rubbish. Ryan feels that he can now do some work for Tanxing, and by the way kill this group of guys who are fighting for opportunities with their own group. Thinking of this, Lane and Hermione whispered. Then they magically attacked the 3K scum and threw them into the river to feed the Nile crocodiles. By the way, the Oblivion Curse cleared all the memory of the other party guide Benny about Hamnata. As a result, shortly after they returned to the ship's room, the ship shuddered, slowed down, and finally stopped. What happened? Evelyn asked curiously. Soon Jonathan heard the news from outside. I heard that several Americans were missing on the ship, so now we need to dock at the nearest pier, and now we have to walk a lot more. Soon the ship came to a small dock, and the passengers on the ship left each other after being questioned by the police on board. www.mtlnovel.com. Lane happened to see the American historian and the guide Benny when they disembarked, led by a group of local laborers, and walked in another completely wrong direction. It seems that the cunning Benny decided to take the American professor to take a walk in the desert after he found out that he didn't remember Hamnata's position, and cheated some money by the way. The next trip was to ride a horse in the desert. To be precise, the surroundings should be regarded as Gobi, so horses can also be used in this place. After leaving the human settlement on the side of the Nile, Ryan showed Rose Crystal in shape and introduced Evelyn, and they introduced another member of the expedition. This magic is really magical. Evelyn watched the puppets flying up and down to scout the surroundings from time to time and exclaimed, this way we don't have to worry about things attacking us at night. Although the place where they disembarked was further away from Hamnata than in the movie because the protagonist's group jumped off the boat after the boat caught fire, it was also further away because ships did not have enough navigation lights and radars in this era. In this case, ships in general rivers would not sail at night in order to avoid hitting reefs or stranding. This is why the Pharaoh guards in the movie can have so many people lurking silently on the ship, because the ship was in a moored state at that time, otherwise it would certainly not be able to catch up with the motorboat. It's too big for the same motorboat to chase. Chapter 508, Curse. This little expedition walked in the desert for a whole day, and Ryan took advantage of this opportunity to begin teaching Hermione how to ride a horse. Although Hermione had ridden horses a few times when she was a child, at that time, at most, she was riding a horse on a flat horse farm. She hadn't really tried to ride a horse, so Ryan taught her how to ride a horse when she was on her way. Fortunately, Hermione had strengthened many times before to obtain excellent physical coordination and flexibility, which allowed her to ride on the horse in just over half an hour. On the way, to prevent the descendants of the Pharaoh guards from intercepting them in advance, Ryan released a secret magic to cover up their physique to the whole team, and at the same time let Rose Crystal cordial out, using her intelligence-erasing ability to completely remove the traces left by them along the way. Just when they walked for an afternoon and an evening, the stars on the dark blue sky faded away, and the eastern sky began to light up again slowly. Evelyn shouted loudly, "We are here now." As soon as the words fell, a bright red line was inlaid on the distant horizon, and then a golden ball of light appeared in front. The sun rose like this, and at the same time showed its own power. The surrounding temperature immediately rose quickly. Before the sun had risen, he could still feel a cold wind digging into his clothes. But now the whole person is as warm as in the heating room. At the same time, on the deserted Gobi Desert, which was originally empty and not far in front, the air turned out to be a city built of yellow stones and bricks. Hamnata. This is Hamnata. This is simply a miracle. I swear I have never seen such a strange sight in my life. Jonathan exhaled loudly. Ryan opened the heavenly eyes using the method recorded in the Taoist law of the Qing dynasty and then looked at the ruins in front of him. The scenery in the sight suddenly changed, and the dazzling golden sunlight on the Gobi Desert was almost completely blocked. The ruins were shrouded in heavy black mist like mountains, and a human face stood out from time to time. Hermione also looked at Ryan at this time, and she was obviously sensitive to the breath of death and she also felt the power hidden in the ruins. However, this is also the goal for Ryan to come here, so Ryan relaxes the reins, and after his legs are forced on both sides of the horse's tummy, the crotch horse sprints forward like a charged arrow. Hermione also caught up after seeing this scene. After entering the ruins, under the leadership of Evelyn, they walked directly to a statue in the distance. After approaching, Ryan discovered the wolf-headed body of the statue. It should be Anubis, the of death in ancient Egyptian mythology. In such a place, Evelyn is like a fish. Her knowledge has been fully applied. Soon, several metal discs were found by her. According to her, this is an ancient Egyptian mirror. It was a special tool that was created by people in ancient times to illuminate the ground with the help of sunlight. There is a way to get into the ruins of the subject. Soon Hermione found a hole in the underground through the breath of death leaking from the ruins, and then fixed the mirror to provide light for the underground. The four men descended with magic, and then Evelyn found an ancient mirror and adjusted the direction of the mirror slightly. In an instant, the entire black lacquered space was illuminated. It turns out that there are many ancient mirrors in the room. These mirrors are cleverly fixed in specific positions. After the light comes in, they can be continuously reflected to illuminate the entire room. This is the preparation room. The ancient Egyptians made mummy here. The things we were looking for will not be here. After looking around for a while, Evelyn made her judgment, so everyone can only move on. Ryan took out 4 helmets with headlights to bring to everyone at this time, and then passed a long tunnel under the illumination of the headlights to another room. This should be the leg of the death sculpture above, Evelyn said, looking at the beautifully carved stone platform in the corner of the room. This is an obvious situation because there are 2 black legs. Step on the stone platform. The secret compartment should be somewhere at the bottom. According to the introduction on the stele in the Cairo Museum, the Sun Sutra is hidden at the foot of the statue of death in Hamnata. Evelyn kept looking at the seat. Shitai murmured to himself. Finally, after knocking the entire stone platform, she was excited to pry off a stone slab with a crowbar in her hand. Shouldn't archaeology be a little bit of wearing thick gloves and small brushes? What is Evelyn doing? Hermione was shocked when she saw Evelyn's gravel splashing with a crowbar. Asked, should this be a feature of archaeology in this era? I remember that Shriman, who was digging Troy, dug a huge ditch directly above the ruins to damage or confuse many excavations in order to dig the Troy ruins he wanted as fast as possible. Unearthed artifacts, Lane replied after recalling a book he had read. Of course, we can't let them do such brutality right now. After talking, Ryan stepped forward to stop Evelyn, who was trying in vain to pry open the slate. Miss Evelyn, you need to consider that normal people will set up many traps around such treasures, such as organ traps or worse curse of magic. It's easy to pry like you. You are right. I was so excited that I forgot. Evelyn dropped the crowbar in her hand. Then what do we do? Are you willing to release magic? Well, no. Ryan shook his head. Because we feel that this whole ruin is shrouded in a special magical enchantment. Once we use magic, it is likely to cause some bad consequences. But we have an alternative. A minute later, in the shocked eyes of Evelyn's brothers and sisters, Two one-size spider-like steel robots crawled out of a blue door, then inserted a few steel pieces into the gap and began to drag. The steel cable attached to the steel sheet was pulled outward. The power of the machine is definitely not comparable to that of human beings. A whole black slate was unloaded, and a large amount of high-pressure white liquid was also sprayed out. The two steel cables were corroded and broken instantly. It was some kind of strong acid, Hermione said after seeing this scene, and then turned to Evelyn and Jonathan next to him. So I hope you will listen to us in a moment, and don't make your own claims. If otherwise, some fatal injuries can't be saved even if we have magic. Of course. Evelyn and Jonathan were also frightened by the scene just now. If the strong acid that can corrode the steel in an instant would corrode people would be killed on the spot. After waiting for a while to make sure there were no other institutions, they took a large box from the hole behind the slate. Blowing the dust from the box, Evelyn looked at the hieroglyphs written on the lid of the box and read, "Whoever opens this box will not escape the scourge of death." When this box is opened, it was originally resentment closed by the holy law. The spirit will break the curse and return to the world. He will kill all the people who have opened the box, take his internal organs and blood, and then resurrect from the cursed spirit. It will turn into an evil that harms the world. The voice just fell, and a strange voice echoed in the space. Everyone felt as if something had been activated. This is just a kind of intimidation common in ancient Egyptian tombs. Jonathan was trying to appease everyone's emotions, and suddenly saw Ryan and Hermione staring at him with extremely serious expressions. Won't it be true? It's true. Ryan nodded. There is an extremely powerful magic prop in it, and there are several sources of curses. Once the box is opened, we think there is a high probability that these curses written on the lid will become true. Then what shall we do? After hearing you say this, I think what we are looking for is in this box. Do we just go back empty-handed? You are wizards. Evelyn seemed a little excited. That's not necessary. Lane nodded. In the face of this grievance, we are professionals, but we have to do a lot of preparation in advance. Chapter 509, Hands-on. Ryan's preparation for Evelyn was not particularly complicated, and by that evening they had already moved everything they needed to the ground. These included the first dug box containing Imogen's internal organs, the box containing the Sun Sutra found at the foot of the Sun sculpture, and finally they found the sarcophagus containing the Amun mummy at the foot of the Death sculpture. Is this? Evelyn asked as he looked at the half bottle of bright red liquid that Ryan had handed over, because she had just seen Ryan and Hermione fill a half bottle of liquid in a silver cup just now, and then drank it all at once. Go on. Doping, Ryan explained. Some of the work we need to complete overnight. If everything goes well, we can solve the possible curse problem at 12 noon tomorrow. The following night, Ryan and they built a 3-story circular altar over 2 people tall, then put the sarcophagus whose black smoke was solidified into substance from the perspective of Ryan's eyes, and placed it on the altar, then opened the space door and took out a sack. The sack of sunlight crystal began to inlay on the altar. In order to avoid the reaction caused by the devil, this process must be completely manual, so in addition to Gil, who may induce the guy in the coffin to come alive, the 5 people are busy for one night and increase the whole altar for half an morning. That's not a gem. You don't have to put it in your pocket. After eating, watching Jonathan sit for a moment, the pants pocket lighted up like the camera's flash. Ryan said helplessly, the sun crystallizes if you really like it. I can give you a pocket, but please don't deduct it from this. It will be related to the lives of each of us for a while. After inspecting the altar, Ryan ordered the robot to dig 8 large pits in the east, west, south, and north directions around the altar, and then filled them all with 30 cubic crystals of sunlight. Okay. The next step is the last step. We need to open this coffin and expose the mummy that is the source of the curse to the natural environment. Watching the sun in the sky was about to climb to the highest place, Lane told everyone speaking. In his last life, Ryan saw that many traversers came to this world in the novel, but they all brought Immortan back to life without exception. Afterwards, they all fought against Immortan in a variety of ways. In the end, they had to pay a lot of money to kill Morton. In the process, the 10 disasters caused by Immortan also killed a large number of innocent people. Ryan couldn't figure out how these peers knew how the plot would bring this guy back to life, although his love story was sympathetic. But after 3,000 years of torment, Immortan has completely transformed into an extremely evil spirit. It can be seen from the story that he basically does not treat people as people, and slaughter those innocent people at will. In the face of such a guy, Ryan felt that it was the best choice to wipe him out completely. So this time Ryan found that he simply chose a solution once and for all in this world. Before that, he had always carried that key in his own space bag. I don't know if it is the reason why other world planes will like it. Under the influence of the cosmic consciousness encountered by other colleagues, Evelyn can get the key to read the resurrection spell anyway. Morton remained quiet in his coffin and did not come out. After Ryan greeted, 5 people walked up the altar along the steps of the altar. Ryan took the key out of the space bag, opened it, looked at it, and then stuffed it in the same way as the hexagonal groove on the coffin. Twisted. A small click sound came from the coffin. which meant that the organ inside was opened. "Let's see what the source of this curse is," Ryan said, and put a bubble head curse on everyone with Hermione. Afterwards, the four men slammed the coffin lid open. "This is impossible," Evelyn exclaimed again and again after seeing what was in the coffin, because the mummy lying in the coffin had a big hole in his head and the boss opened his mouth, but it wasn't the dryness it should be. Instead, the skin and muscles are only a little bit spoiled, and most of the rest are intact. No, Hermione didn't know much about archaeology, but after Ryan saw death in so many worlds on the sidewalk, she found that the body in front of him was more like a death within a month than it was. It has been dead for 3,000 years. At this time Jonathan glanced over his head in an attempt to find possible gold and silver jewelry funerary in the coffin, but was disappointed to find that there was nothing here. However, after a careful search, he found that there were many long marks deep in the wooden board on the inside of the coffin cover that was lifted off. "What is this?" "Human finger marks," Ryan said after making a gesture with his hand on the coffin cover. "Combining that there is no linen wrapped around this mummy and a little bit of ashes from the rotten linen found in the corner of the coffin, we can infer this mummy. It was put into a coffin alive." So he was struggling to remove the linen. As soon as the words fell, everyone on the altar gasped. Even if Ryan and Hermione used to have blood stained on their hands, but as Ryan thought, the killing was not too much, so the murder was too much. And more than that, Ryan said as he took out the skeletons of several black bugs from the ashes at the bottom of the coffin. "This is some kind of carnivorous beetle. They not only kept this person alive in the coffin, but poured it into it." Carnivorous beetle. The punishment of insect bite. Evelyn looked at the situation and recognized exactly what was going on. This is the most vicious and irreversible curse of ancient Egypt. In the records, they never use this punishment, because the legendary people who receive this punishment will be resurrected in the future, and then bring great disaster to the entire Egypt. Speaking of this, Evelyn turned her head ugly and looked at Ryan and Hermione and asked, "So, he is the source of the curse you said? If it is someone who has been punished by insects, it is indeed eligible to be punished. Called a huge evil. Death is just the beginning." Hermione also recognized the meaning of the ancient Egyptian text engraved on the coffin cover by I. Morton's finger at this time. www.mplnovel.com. She looked at Ryan and said, "Does he come back from death like us?" Also, Jonathan, who stood idly by this time, heard the word Hermione said, and then looked at Ryan and Hermione with shocked eyes, but Ryan ignored his eyes and said to Evelyn, "Okay, next, we are going to hold a magic ritual to completely eliminate the evil. You and your brother are just ordinary people, and I suggest you better evacuate outside the ruins." "Okay." Evelyn nodded and turned to leave with his brother, while Rose Crystal followed them to protect them. But the two did not go far, but walked out of the outermost wall for a distance, then stood behind a sand pile and looked at the direction of the altar with a telescope. Lane discovered this, but he said nothing. Instead, he went to the altar with Hermione to open the two boxes containing the scriptures, and then moved the holy urns with Ansuna's internal organs to the mummy beside the altar. "Did you feel it?" Ryan asked Hermione after placing the two sutras on each side of the altar. "Feel it?" Hermione nodded. "When we first opened the box, we were calibrated by a breath of death, but it was easy to erase this with our strength." "No need to erase," Ryan said. "Now you are trying to use the power of death to attract all the things in this remnant that have the same breath of death." Hermione nodded, then gestured with both hands, and soon a faint black mist flowed from her fingertips, and flowed along the ground a little to those ruins. Soon after, the voice came from the underground. Chapter 510, Punishment. After hearing the sound, Ryan and Hermione stood on the altar and looked towards the place where the sound was coming from the ruins. I saw that one after another began to appear on the sand. These drums grew larger and larger, until they reached the height of a human waist. These drums broke apart, and countless slap-sized black scarabs poured out from these places like tide. "Withering." Hermione sternly pronounced a mantra in the advanced Valyria language, and the black mist that had been released from her fingers before quickly formed a thick wall of fog around the altar. Although the scarabs have been sealed for many years, they are still living things. At the same time, even if they can penetrate into the human body to bite, they are still only insects, and the life force contained in each body is very weak. In this case, they quickly lost their lives after breaking into the foggy wall of death under Hermione. Within a few minutes a wall of scarab corpses was built up high around the altar. Just after these scarabs began to slowly reduce the attack on the defense line, a heavy footsteps came. A large number of mummies swarmed from the exits of the ruins and ran to the altar. There are ancient acolytes who are clumsy and obese. There are also guards with shiny weapons in corroded armor. Because they are dead, the outer line of defense is not good for this group of mummies. After watching them pass through the black mist of death, Lane read in Kenya, "The sun shines." Stimulated by magic, the 8 large pits filled with crystals of sunlight at the same time released the dazzling sunlight. This is derived from the power of the sun, which has absolute restraint on these mummies, not to mention that it is noon in the desert now. By the advantage of the time, these suns form an indestructible golden barrier around the altar. A piece of sunlight melted into this piece of sunlight at the fastest speed, and no mummy could touch the side of the altar. Finally, The sun reached this highest point. Ryan watched the scarabs and mummies, who were still perseveringly attacking the defense line, and shook their heads gently, then stood in the middle of the altar and recited the spell. The essence of Jiao Jia and Bee spirits. Yang Bo inspires, Yan'll quickly rises. As Ryan raised his hands to recite the spell, black clouds appeared in the sky out of thin air, and finally slowly in the sky above Nata gathered into a large area that completely covered the noon sun. The sound of rumbling came from the clouds, and at the same time the purple light that appeared and disappeared in the clouds. Even standing on the altar, Lane can feel the powerful energy contained in the clouds. When the last word of the spell was spit out, Ryan felt as if a mountain pressed against him. At this time, Hermione, who was in communication with his heart, had withdrawn the ring of mist formed by the power of death at the same time, and launched the indestructible fire in the ring to form a protective cover glowing with white light on his body. Seeing that everything was ready, Ryan slowly lowered his right hand that was held high and then extended his index finger and to point at the mummy Iman lying in the coffin. Rumble. In an instant, the clouds in the sky were completely formed. At the next moment, the sky above the Hamnata ruins was covered by the light of heaven's punishment. Brothers and sisters Evelyn, not far from the gates of the ruins, and the guards who were drawn on the cliffs in the distance wherever it is now covered with golden-purple lightning. Is this a wizard? Jonathan exclaimed, looking at the ancient ruins that turned into a sea of thunder. It looks like the power of a god. Is there really anyone who can do this? But he didn't get any answer, because at this time his sister Evelyn looked at every inch in shock. The space is full of thunder ruins. In the perception of all the people outside the ruins, whenever they look at the black thunder cloud, there is an instinctive fear in the heart. With a loud bang, a gleam of light burst from the layer high in the sky. This means that the punishment has really begun. Unlike the fake punishment made by Ryan in the second grade, this time the real punishment was extraordinary even at the beginning. Soon the thunder sea in the sky gathered the first attack to lock the mummy on the altar, and then dozens of thunders poured down. And in the coffin on the altar, Morton, who is the target of this thunder, also felt the trouble at this moment. However, the power that he can use without being resurrected by the undead black scripture is very small. But even so, the power of possessing the soul of grievance accumulated in 3,000 years cannot be underestimated. Ryan only felt a scream from his soul, and then a face made of black smoke flew from the coffin fiercely and directly greeted the thunder from the sky. Then a thunderous explosion exploded in the sky. When the sound stopped, neither the thunder nor the face just disappeared, and the mummy of Imogen in the coffin was safe and sound. Hermione looked at this scene in astonishment, but soon Ryan comforted her through a spiritual connection. It's okay, this kind of natural punishment is 749, and the power is constantly increasing. I don't believe it. This mummy can all be carried over. Sure enough, while they were communicating, the thunder cloud in the sky began to rotate slowly, and soon more thunderbolts flew out of the vortex in the thunder cloud than before to go straight to the mummy lying in the coffin. Naturally, this time Morton still mobilized the breath of death around to block the thunder and lightning. However, a very small part of the extra power of heavenly punishment hit the mummy directly, and Ryan discovered through the eye of heaven that part of the dead black mist trapped in the original mummy was directly destroyed by the power of heavenly punishment. It seems that punishment is indeed the nemesis of this evil force. Ryan thought of the left hand waving a few runes in the air, and the crystallized sunlight that had been placed around him was activated. Then the wall of light that originally surrounded the altar began to rise continuously, and finally connected directly to the deep black cloud, which looked like a golden beam of light like the Pillar of Optimus in the distance. Under the effect of these sunlight crystals, the black mist around Imodo's mummy is constantly being worn away. When the 6th day's penalty came down, Imoten's face made of black mist was directly crushed by the thunder's thunder, and part of the thunder hit the mummy directly. The place where the mummy was hit by the thunder of punishment was instantly transformed into coke. Although the force of death restored part of the body to its original state, the size of the fist around the point that was directly hit cannot be recovered anyway. Gradually, under the continuous attack of the thunder of punishment, Immortan's mummy has more and more parts like coke, and finally even the whole body was completely transformed into fly ash under lightning strike. Only a thick black smoke like a solid floated above the altar to resist the attack of heaven penalty. A face growled loudly from time to time in the thick black smoke. With his roar, the fish that had not been summoned in the call of Hermione just swarmed out. But in front of the punishment, both the mummy and the scarab are too fragile. Just a little bit of the aftermath of the sky thunder wiped these things out completely from this world. Finally, with the last 3 days of thunder and thunder falling, this thick black smoke brought Immortan's last traces in the world to be completely wiped out. www.mtlnovel.com And this disappeared together holy urn and coffin. When the thunderclouds dispersed, the ruins of Hamnata became quiet again. Only the thick black ash on the ground and the bare round earth altar showed what had just happened. Just when Ryan thought everything was over, a golden ball resembling the sun and a black ball appearing in the dark were raised above the Sun Sutra and the undead Black Sutra previously placed on the altar. The two small twirled around the altar and disappeared into the sky. At the same time, Ryan heard a grand and cold voice in his mind. "Thank you for removing the evil spirits in this land. Let the dust return to the dust, the soil return to the soil. Purple immortal gods, all the wealth here it's yours now." "What's that?" Hermione asked, looking at the direction where the two disappeared. "This is the divine power contained in the two scriptures. It is also good for us to take the initiative to leave. Otherwise, we cannot really use this kind of thing that contains the power of other gods." As a person who has seen the power of gods, Ryan instantly recognized what the two light flew away. This also made him finally know why in the movie Evelyn and Jonathan clearly did not have any mana, but they could cast magic as long as they read the spell. Finally, the sounds that Ryan heard were estimated to be the Sun God and the Grim Reaper. After they found that Imogen had completely disappeared, they simply withdrew the divine power used to suppress, but Ryan had rose crystals as gods in the world of ice and fire. After being tasted, as a respect for the power of the same level, they gave him all the worldly wealth here in Hamnata as compensation for taking away the divine power. "We made a lot of money this time," Lane whispered as he looked at the two books on the ground. Chapter 511, Pharaoh Bodyguard. The Undead Black Scripture and the Solar Golden Scripture are one of the most important artifacts in the world. In fact, they were originally books made of gold, obsidian, and bronze. But thousands of years of nourishment have made them truly artifacts. After opening the two books with a key in the space bag, they realized that the so-called two books contained all the magic of ancient Egypt. After all, these two books are made of thick gold plates or obsidian slabs, plus heavy bronze connectors. So each of the two books has only 7 pages each. 7 is a magic number. It seems that this statement has a long history. Hermione sighed after reading these two books. They had repeatedly emphasized this point in the arithmetic divination class they had before, but Ryan, what I didn't think is that even with distant space and time, this rule still persists. After further inspection, they found a point that disappointed them even more. I do not know whether it was because of technology or other reasons. Each hieroglyph engraved on these thick plates has a size of 2 centimeters, plus a lot of half-palm-sized illustrations. It does look beautiful enough, but this directly leads to the spells on the cover of every book. Only 15 spells are recorded. The two books add up to a total of 30 spells. But after reading it carefully, Ryan found that the spells inside were stronger than imagined, and they could contain a lot of other spells through the above spells. For example, the book contains magic for resurrection and large-scale changes in the natural environment. At the same time, you can use the basic runes of these magics to easily infer other magics. However, these all require divine support. Relying solely on magic, Ryan found that he could not achieve the same effect unless he used ritual magic, but it could not be used in combat at all. Not to mention that due to the difference in the world, some magic can only be effective in this world. For example, because the rules of death are slightly different in each world, many worlds do not allow people to resurrect after a certain degree on the road to death. Did you just make that movement? Has the evil here been wiped out? Just after Ryan and Hermione read the two books roughly, Evelyn and Jonathan spent a lot of time and rose crystal to appease the horses that were scared by the thunder just now and ran over. Yes, not only was it wiped out, and all the treasures in this underground, including these two books, are now given to us by their owners. Lane and Hermione smiled happily holding the book. Wait for us to go down, deal with those dangerous institutions, and then you can go to the treasure house to move the baby. Then Ryan and the two of them went down to the ruins to inspect the whole ruin again. With the help of Ryan's mechanical knowledge, all the organs of this ruin were discovered and destroyed one by one. In the end, they reached the ceremony at the bottom of the ruins, that is, the house where E. Morton tried to resurrect Ansuna in the movie. This is the gate that communicates death. Entering this pool will lead you directly to the place of death, just like when we walked through the stone arch in the Ministry of Magic Mystery Division. But the difference is that the dead want to go through this gate. It's much more convenient to get out here than ours. Ryan introduced to Hermione after walking over the bridge that was rolling over the black liquid and the bone pit. Is this the difference between the rules of death in different worlds? Hermione looked at the black liquid thoughtfully, and after saying hello to Ryan, she directly picked up the Undead Black Scripture and the Solar Golden Scripture and turned to cross-legged, sitting on the edge of the black water and studying. Lane looked at Hermione, who was in an epiphany, and smiled. There are not many opportunities to face the rules he studied so directly. Lane will not affect Hermione at this time, so he used magic to clean up the house. After releasing some robots, he left here and went back to the ground to find Evelyn brothers and sisters and Rose Crystal. But when he first came to the ground, he saw a black shadow appear on the horizon, and then got closer and closer. Black Robe Cavalry? Ryan immediately saw who was running in the past. This should be a descendant of the Guardian of the Land, the Fair Guard. It's just that Ryan used magic to cover up his team's whereabouts when they came over, so that the descendants of the Fair Guard who sent out in the distance until the thunder rolled just now reacted and began to gather people, but there was no modern communication equipment under the circumstances. It was only now that they had assembled enough manpower to summon the courage and rushed over. At this time, Evelyn and Jonathan also ran out of the temporary awning just built. and then took out their telescopes and looked into the distance. After seeing what came over, Jonathan unconsciously pulled out his small pistol in front of his sister and prepared to take the sister to run, but he didn't move his footsteps and found Ryan standing there calmly. After seeing this scene, Jonathan also calmly stood with his sister and looked at the black cavalry who were getting closer and closer. The cavalry slowed down as they approached Hamnata, and then stopped at a distance of 20 or 30 meters from the entrance. When the big troops stopped, a dozen people in black robe came out and spoke with the people in the rear. After riding a horse, they walked slowly towards the entrance of the ruins. After walking into the entrance and seeing Ryan, the headed man turned over and dismounted, and walked to his knees in front of him to perform an ancient ceremony. Godkeeper from afar. The ancient evil destroyer. Hello, dear Abby, the leader of the Pharaoh's bodyguard. It is an honor to see you. When Ryan saw it, he bowed slightly and returned him a courtesy of a wizard. Then he asked Abby, who stood up. Hello, you can call me Ryan. What is the matter with you coming here? Our Pharaoh guards have guarded Hamnata from generation to generation, that is, to avoid the release of Pharaoh Serti's high priest Imerton, who was discovered because of a secret relationship with Pharaoh's concubine Ansuna. Afterwards, he teamed up with Ansuna to kill Pharaoh. So our ancestors used him on in www.mtlnovel.com. Cruel punishment, insect bite. Abby told the news about this www.mtlnovel.com. So, if it wasn't for the elder brother to kill the grudge, he would bring endless darkness to the whole of Egypt, right? After listening to Abby's story, the rose crystal that was hidden in the side of Ryan before asked, "Why did your ancestors leave you such a big trouble?" Abby was stunned by the sudden appearance of the rose crystal, and then looked at Ryan and said, "This wizard, my ancestors were extremely angry because they failed to stop the behavior of Emperor Killer. The ancestors who controlled his mind by anger after he caught him directly punished him with insect bites. However, we have been guarding this place for thousands of years because of fear that this will hurt the people on this land. Atonement for places where our ancestors lacked consideration." Speaking of which, Abby looked at Ryan with grateful eyes. "Because of your help, now our task is finally completed, and we can finally leave this barren land." "Where are you so many people going to?" Ryan asked when he suddenly thought of a question. After all, unlike thousands of years ago, people are everywhere now. Ryan was curious that these Pharaoh descendants would go there. "We don't know." Abby shook his head a little confused. "It is because of the barren land here that we have developed for 3,000 years. And the tribe has a total of more than 50,000 people. We don't know where to go. The hometown thousands of years ago no longer belongs to us. After all, the times have changed and many things become more and more strange. We can only take one step at a time." "I think I have a way," Ryan said as he looked at the leader of the descendant of the ancient Pharaoh bodyguard who seemed a bit lonely. Chapter 512, Ending. 3 days later, at the exit of Hamnata, thousands of camels and horses were carrying packages full of gold and silver jewelry. Standing beside these pack beasts are more than 3,000 descendants of heavily armed Pharaoh bodyguards. And Abby is saying goodbye to Ryan at this time. "Thank you so much. You will be the father of our motherland in the future." The reason why Abby said this is because Ryan gave them a lot of instruction books that he had brought from heaven before learning that they did not know where to go. Then they instructed them to go to the south where the British colonists and the Kingdom of Egypt ruled weekly to establish their bases. By the way, they left most of the large piles of gold and silver jewelry as interest-free long-term loans to them, and told them to use these wealth. People go outside to learn knowledge and purchase materials. These instructions gave Abby great help, and then he ordered some people to go to the south to investigate the situation, and the brigade came here to transport Lane to give them treasure. "I wish you a smooth journey." Ryan waved goodbye to Abby on his horse and was about to leave. In the previous agreement, after the tribes of the descendants of the Pharaoh guards arrived in the south to settle down, various materials would take priority under the same conditions. Procurement from Ryan. So when Abby left, for trade convenience, Ryan gave him a gold defense bracelet, and a beacon on the top could provide Ryan with his location so that Ryan could find him next time. For Ryan, who owns several countries, he does not lack these golds. Now he borrows these golds as interest-free loans to the descendants of the Pharaoh guards. Lane and several of his countries will benefit greatly from this trade, which is much better than moving gold away. "Ah, why are you so generous? Why are we busy all this time?" Jonathan and his sister Evelyn came out from behind a sculpture, watching the camel team slowly walk away with the camel bell ringing. As he walked, he complained bitterly in his mouth, "But even if you give so many valuable things to you, you can't keep it. You may even be killed by these wealth, and I'm giving you just enough for you to let you accomplish your own dreams," Ryan said, pointing to the 3 camels lying next to each other. Each camel has 2 full pockets stuffed with various gold products. "I understand, and thank you very much for your gift to us. But I still feel a little bit distressed." But just now Jonathan was hit by Evelyn's elbow on her chest. "Shut up. It's people's money. It's your turn to express different views here." After that, Evelyn turned her head and said to Ryan, "I am glad you gave us a gift. I think I will soon fulfill my dream of becoming an archaeologist, and I think it's one to fund a group of people to pursue their dreams. A very great thing." "Ah, Thank you for your compliment. Lane smiled. Okay, I have to wait here for my fiancée to learn what she wants to learn. What do you want to do next? Of course I left here with you. Anyway, when I'd be left, they left enough water and food for a long time. I just took this opportunity to study the legendary ruins. In the following time, when Ryan was okay, she had been with Hermione in the lower room to study the power of death in this world, while Evelyn kept taking pictures and recordings throughout the ruins. Her brother Jonathan was helplessly accompanied her to wander around the entire ruins. Because for Jonathan, he prefers to spend time in the bar instead of facing a pile of ancient stone sculptures in this desert. A week after Rigby left, Hermione finally completed her analysis of the death rules of the world. Because a few months ago, she had fully analyzed the rules of death behind the Arch of the Ministry of Magic. So this time, we only need to find some differences in the same rules of the world. This saves a lot of time required for de novo analysis. How long have I been studying here? Hermione asked Ryan, who had been with her after finishing her body. It's been 10 days today, which is already very fast, Ryan said after taking the 2 heavy books passed by Hermione into the space bag. What do you think? Excellent. Hermione raised her eyebrows and said to Ryan, after exposure to the same or similar rules in these different worlds, I found that by comparing their different studies, I could grasp death more quickly. Rules. For example, although the resurrection spell I learned in this world cannot be used in our world due to the different rules of the 2 worlds, it allows me to more accurately understand the core of the death rules and the power of the life and death cycle that I have mastered. That's good. After all, the war in our hometown has fully erupted. At this time, the more powerful we are, the more chance we have. Lane also nodded with a smile. On the way back to the ground, Lane told Hermione how she handled the wealth here. Hermione believes that Ryan did a great job. Hoarding gold and silver jewelry has no use at all. Only the money in circulation can be called money. And you use this money to invest in a group of people is a great thing. Practice. Listening to what Hermione said, Ryan couldn't help but smile in the corner of her mouth. It is really a lucky thing to find someone who is in sync with your own thoughts. Can we go back to Cairo now? Evelyn, with the help of Ryan using magic, has printed all the words and patterns in the ruins or photographed them with a camera. Fortunately, I'd be left at that time. Enough camels were left to allow them to take away a few cannabis bags. Yes, it's all done. Let's go. Lane responded in a relaxed tone. Half a month later, Ryan and Hermione bid farewell to the Evelyn brothers and sisters who took the passenger ship to the UK on the pier. After gaining a fortune, Evelyn could finally go to the university she wanted to study in. On the one hand, her brother is worried that her sister, who has been dependent on herself since the death of her parents, has been bullied in the UK. On the other hand, she has a lot of money and wants to go to the real prosperous place to go for a good stroll, not want to stay in Egypt. Bad place to eat sand. www.mtlnovel.com so naturally followed. Of course, they went idle for Ryan in the last half of the month. After returning to Cairo 8 days ago, Evelyn and Jonathan were naturally busy cashing out those gold and silver jewelry and applying for a series of jobs, such as college. Lynn learned about the legend of the Scorpion Emperor, and then spent 2 days with Hermione on a broom to find the temple with the Scorpion Emperor's bracelet and brought out the bracelet, and the previous one from Humna to the Spears of Judgment found in a pile of jewels were put together. Through another sacrificial activity by Ryan, the power on the bracelet and the Spear of Judgment was once again taken away by the local deity. But the 2 things left can still provide a lot of knowledge. The knowledge on the bracelet is the seal and the seal is unlocked, and the knowledge on the Spear of Judgment is to maximize the energy into lethality, in order to create the greatest monomer destruction. These 2 things are more valuable to Lane than all ordinary gold and silver treasures in Hamnatari. I really don't understand why these ancient people always like to seal those big devil kings. Fortunately, our world does not have this habit, otherwise our trouble now is definitely not just the guy who has no nose and is bald. Hermione was at the time after listening to the story about the Scorpion King. There are such comments. So, our ancestors in the world are still a lot of good people. For example, Hybo, who cultivated the basilisk, used the monster to carry out several large-scale attacks and was directly caught with fire and burned with his soul. Today, we don't have to face the enemies that have emerged from the coffins like the hapless ones here. Ryan expressed absolute agreement with Hermione's point of view. Saving the world is a great thing, but saving the world every day. It's too bad to face different enemies. Chapter 513, Training. Under the clear blue sky, Ryan and Hermione stood on the pier and watched the cruise ship drive further and further on the same clear blue sea until they disappeared after bypassing a small island. After that, the 2 left the dock and found a no-one's place to return to Wanji grocery store with Rose Crystal. After returning to the Wanji grocery store, the system informed Ryan that the trip had gained 95 offset points. This is due to the gains resulting from large-scale changes in the plot. As for the tomb of Emperor Qinshi in the 3rd movie of the original film, Ryan said that this era is too dangerous, and it is safer not to go east. After they packed up their clothes and made Rose Crystal look okay, they left the Wanji grocery store together and reappeared in the Forbidden Forest, and then returned to the castle. In the foyer of the castle, The two of them happened to meet Harry and Ron, who were going to practice at Quidditch Stadium after finishing their homework. "Where did you just go? You just couldn't find the two of you just after class?" Ron asked Ryan, and they. "Some personal affairs." Ryan raised his lips slightly, and then changed the subject. "Are you going out to practice?" "Yes." Harry nodded. "Although we won the first game, we can't take it lightly. We still have to practice hard for the Academy Cup, especially for the first time as the captain. It is very important to be able to lead everyone to win." "Okay, then I wish you all the best for your training. We will see you at dinner." After that, Ryan and Harry said goodbye and returned to Gryffindor's common room. When the time comes to the time of Saturday's book club meeting, after simply solving the academic problems that everyone has accumulated in the previous week, the next time is Professor Ryan's magic time. The problem will be more and more different from the imagination when the workload becomes heavier, and now there are fewer and fewer academic problems that need to be solved in the party at the book club. Of course, this is not because everyone has fewer problems, but now that everyone is basically familiar, other members who will consciously encounter problems in daily life will gather together to discuss the problem. Only those who can't solve it will be asked at the party. In this way, there are naturally fewer problems at the party. "Okay, as I said last time, I will teach you some offensive magic for self-defense, but I need to declare in advance that these magic are different from the prank magic you usually use. The magic of the killing effect. So, I don't want you to use these magics in peacetime, and I don't want to hear any innocent people get hurt because of these magics." After the academic discussion, Ryan ran to the table and was looking forward to using the members who looked at their reading club said. As soon as his voice fell, there was noisiness immediately below, and everyone asked lip-tied, "Lane, what spells are you going to teach us? Last time you said offensive spells, wouldn't it be black magic? I don't know if these magics taught now are easy to learn." "Quiet." Hermione took a step forward standing next to Lane, and then shouted under the platform. "Let our President Ryan finish talking to you one by one. And now he can't answer your question at all." Because Hermione always manages the affairs and discipline of the book club, she has more psychological pressure than the scholars like Ryan in the minds of the members of the book club. So after Hermione finished speaking, the following immediately returned to silence. "Okay, let me make a statement first. What I teach is definitely not black magic. These magics are actually some variants of transfiguration and enchantment. It is just adjusted for combat." After that, Ryan grabbed the classmates under him. "Before we talked, we amplified our voices. Today I teach you the first magic is Fireball." "Fireball?" Hermione's roommate Angela Marcus asked curiously. "Well, do you play Dragon and Dungeon board games?" Just adopted this name. Ryan was also helpless. He had always thought that fireballs, magicians, and the like were only popular in the computer age through computer games, but he was combining natural magic and from heaven. After learning the materials and casting a simple set of combat methods after naming these magics, Hermione reminded him that these things are in the game. Ryan didn't believe it at first, but later he discovered that most computer games born in the future actually appeared in this era of board games. For example, the basis of the most common Western magic background games in the future, D&D, is now a very famous board game. However, instead of naming the name, Ryan not only did not think about the name, but simply took a few game manuals to name himself this pile of magic. After announcing the magic to be taught today, Ryan came down from the stage and emptied the middle of the classroom. Afterwards, he transformed into a humanoid wooden target and placed it in the middle. Then he quit in 2 steps and read in Latin, "Fireball." An instant light spot not much larger than the soy grains flew out of the wand. The light spot exploded when it touched the wooden target, leaving a palm-sized burnt black trace on the wooden target. However, after Ryan waved his wand to cut off the burnt place, everyone saw from the section that the burnt place had burned the outermost layer by at most a millimeter. "It doesn't look good." Justin chuckled. "It doesn't seem to have a stronger coma spell." "Do you really think so?" Ryan smiled a mysterious smile, and then pulled 3 small of black paint from the leather bag around his waist. Neville, who was closer to him, smelled it from inside. When it came to an unpleasant smell, I asked, "What is this?" "Pitch and fluorescent edelweiss are that way 5 to 1, Lane said. "Electrofluor edelweiss is the main ingredient of the cold medicine Mrs. Pomfrey gave us. 2 Westco's can buy 1.5 as for bitumen. It's even cheaper. £2 is only 1 nat. The outside world uses this thing to pave the road or waterproof the roof. So what's the use of this thing?" "Eat it?" Luna asked, staring at Ryan with her bulging eyes. "It's used like this." Ryan touched the 3 small with the wand's tail, and then read in Latin, "Fire www.mtlnovel.com." Instantly the 3 small turned into a pool of black liquid. Then he quickly climbed along the wand to the head of the wand. After looking at the liquid fixed on the head of the wand, Lane turned his head and asked the students around him to add an iron curse to himself. After Hermione confirmed that all the iron armor spells were ready, Lane used the fireball spell again. After the same light spot fell on the wooden target, it burst out in the eyes of everyone. Suddenly a huge ball of fire enveloped the entire wooden target, and the sturdy wooden board was torn apart in the explosion. Is this enough to keep up with the power of grenades? Angela, from the military family of generations, looked at the scene in shock. It seems that this kind of magic is really worth learning. His thoughts also represent the thoughts of everyone who sees this purpose, so everyone will be very serious in the next study. Until the reminder bell before the curfew sounded, Ryan successfully persuaded those excited students to go back. Rest. Of course, when they went out, Ryan repeatedly told them to practice in a place where no one was by the lake when they practiced. At the same time, the use of casting materials is not allowed. Just as Ryan finished packing and left, a parchment bird flew in front of him and stopped. When he opened it, he found it was Professor Dumbledore's note, and asked Ryan to have a cup of tea at his office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Finally, a password for his office tomorrow is attached. Who gave it to you? Hermione asked, looking at the note in Ryan's hand. Adult our headmaster. Ryan shrugged. These things we practice today are indeed dangerous, so the principal knows that it is normal to talk to me for safety reasons. Rest assured, there should be nothing wrong. Chapter 514, Communicate with. The next day is a weekend, the weather is rare and nice. After waking up early, Ryan jogged with Hermione and said goodbye to her after breakfast, then stepped on the hallway from the window into the bright golden sunlight in the hallway and walked to the headmaster's office door. When he came to the door and read the opening password to the monster, and slandered Dumbledore's taste for sweets, Ryan came to the door of the Dumbledore's office with a brass door knocker through the spiral stairs. After politely knocking on the knocker, the door opened automatically, and Ryan saw Professor Dumbledore sitting in the chair behind his largest table, crossing his fingers and thinking about something. After seeing Ryan outside the door, he smiled at Ryan and stretched out his hand, making a pleased gesture, instructing Ryan to sit down in the chair in front of him. Good morning, Professor Dumbledore. After sitting on the chair, Ryan bowed slightly and greeted Professor Dumbledore. Good morning, Ryan. What do you want to drink now? Dumbledore asked with a smile, then stretched out his wand and tapped the table and kept changing drinks. Black tea, pumpkin juice, or a little lemonade? Hot black tea. Ryan's words fell, and 2 cups of hot black tea appeared in front of the two. After taking the cup and sitting down, Lane looked at Headmaster Dumbledore and asked, Excuse me, did you find me here this morning? Of course, I certainly need something to find you. This is how things look like, Dumbledore said in a slow voice peculiar to the elderly. I noticed that you gave your classmates at your small party yesterday. It seems to be teaching some magic that is not suitable for them now, so I think I should remind you today. But I teach you that magic is definitely not black magic, Ryan said decisively. I remember that in Hogwarts it was forbidden for everyone to learn dangerous black magic, but it was not said that everyone was not allowed to learn this kind of magic. Yes, it is, Dumbledore said slowly. The magic you teach you is indeed not black magic, but the power of these magics is not small, and it will cause various problems for learners or others. For example, I think it is easy to take the risk of learning those 2 dangerous spells. Someone was injured as a result. You are right in saying that these magics are indeed not lethal, and it is impossible to ensure 100% safety in learning. Lane stared at Dumbledore's blue eyes and nodded seriously. But I'm afraid you are wrong. I think these magics are what everyone should learn now. Watching Dumbledore put his elbows on the table and listened carefully, Ryan said, sitting upright. I know. You always think that the war with the mysterious people and their group is just the task of you and those few brave volunteers. I hope that the war will not involve those innocent people. This is equivalent to putting all the pressure on you. On his shoulders. Your compliments make me feel blushed. I'm not as great as you said. The reason why I fight Voldemort is to make up for the mistakes I made when I was young. Dumbledore shook with a bitter smile after hearing Ryan's praise. Shook his head. But in any case, you are still at the forefront of the resistance to the mysterious people, and I respect you at this point. Ryan said. But one thing you may have overlooked is that the current situation is not just a phoenix. The Society and the Ministry of Magic can solve it. Speaking of which, Lion paused and said, now the mysterious man's attack on the magical world has evolved into a full-scale war. Even the outside mole world is facing their random indiscriminate attacks and has suffered serious casualties. One thing to note is that the members of my interest group all belong to the mysterious man and his Death Eaters as the priority targets of attack due to family background. So I think it is very necessary to teach them some combat skills. You should believe that we and the Ministry of Magic can provide adequate protection, especially in our school, which should be absolutely safe, Dumbledore said after thinking for a while. Sorry, it's hard for me to believe this, Ryan said looking at Dumbledore helplessly. The blood crimes caused by the Death Eaters alone have already explained the problem very well. Everyone hopes to really learn to fight, so that even if we really meet the Death Eaters, we will not sit still. For example, Neville said that compared with waiting for death, he would rather choose to die as gloriously as a soldier in battle. Neville Longbottom? Professor Dumbledore sighed after hearing the name, and then silently for more than 10 seconds. We were careless after Voldemort disappeared. This is our mistake. I owe Long many things from the Barton family. People are old, They always think about things before. Soon Dumbledore walked out of his memories and said to Ryan in a negotiated tone, I think Voldemort has indeed brought everyone dangerous. I also hope that every teacher and student will be vigilant at all times and never take it lightly. In this case, there is no problem for you to learn to defend yourself. But why is it not safer to learn to disarm or coma like last year? What about magic? After listening to Dumbledore's words, Ryan found that the differences between him were not as great as expected. This is just due to the principal's simple worry about his students. It is the same as many primary and secondary school principals who worry that students will simply cancel the spring tour or autumn tour. It is not that some places in the previous life seem to have the same reason as Dumbledore needed to control the overall situation, so he will try to suppress all uncertainties. But think about it too. A person who can get the praises of most people in the magic world must not be the kind of guy who is alone. Except for the key figures like Harry who are concerned about the final victory, Dumbledore is actually a semi-indulgent state for most people, including Ryan. There is no need to worry about being targeted specifically by Dumbledore. For example, now, after the party is over, a notice is sent to the hand immediately. This means that the principal has a very high degree of control over the school, and as an experienced centenarian, Dumbledore should also see what the book club is going to do. However, his attitude towards the book club has always been laissez-faire. Only this time it may actually cause serious harm before he intervened. But even so, the principal still adopted a gentle communication method to solve the problem. Since it is not directly targeted, it means that Professor Dumbledore can be persuaded. Ryan seemed much more energetic at the thought. Professor Dumbledore, I also don't want to put my classmates in danger. But now it is more dangerous outside, and Death Eaters will definitely not let us go because we are students or minors. But even if you learn these magics, you won't be the opponents of those murderous Death Eaters. In this case, it's not worth the risk to learn these dangerous magics. Dumbledore crossed his hands, chest, leaning forward slightly said, but after learning these magics, at least we can have a fight. Maybe there is a chance to escape. But if you don't master these powerful magics, you can only sit and wait to die. Looking at Professor Dumbledore's thinking, Ryan quickly hit the iron while still hot www.mtlnovel.com. We don't have much ambition, and we don't want to hurt others. The only purpose of learning these magic is to hope to survive this war. Yeah, live. Professor Dumbledore sighed long. I have seen too many deaths in my life, and I don't want to see any more innocent people die. Ryan knew that this should be the principal's truth. The reason why Dumbledore struggled with Voldemort in the rest of his life was that he even took his own life in the original text. A large part of the reason is the atonement for the younger sister's death caused by her own actions when she was young. He also learned a lot from that mistake, including that the person who controls the power must be responsible, otherwise it will only bring disaster. The reason why he talked with Ryan today was that he was worried that Ryan was controlled by power. Fortunately, the result of the conversation made him greatly relieved. I think I can allow you to continue to study these magics, which is to enable more innocent people to survive, Professor Dumbledore said for a moment. But you better keep your safety, otherwise I can only withdraw my permission. Well, today is the weekend, and I wish you a happy weekend. Thank you, Professor. I will definitely put everyone's safety first. Please don't worry. Ryan stood up and gave a serious bow to Dumbledore before leaving the principal's office. It's not like you. Just after Ryan left, the portrait of Phineas on the wall said openly. Dumbledore ignored him and murmured as he watched where Ryan left. I may be really old, so this time I just hope I can have enough strength to protect young people as much as possible before they grow up completely. Chapter 515, New Magic. In the following month, Ryan began to study the 4 artifacts brought out from the mummy world on the one hand, and on the other hand, he continued to teach everyone in the book club to learn magic. After a month of learning, everyone learned to stab, fireball, wind dart and water mist 4 magic. The first 3 can be used together to attack, and the last one can form a large fog to cover the enemy's sight. Why don't we teach you some defensive magic similar to the Iron Mantra? Hermione couldn't help asking at the end of the last party before Christmas. Please, we can't measure everyone's ability according to our magic level. Ryan looked helpless. We have enough magic and magical knowledge to use magic to turn out a shield that can block the life-spelling spell. Just like Harry told us what Dumbledore did when he was fighting the mysterious man in the Hall of the Ministry of Magic. But we students can't do this. The magic I teach them is definitely not the most powerful and complicated, but the set of magic best suited to their current state. A set of magic? Hermione asked curiously. You only taught 4 magics. Where can you tell that this is a set of magic? Don't tell me because you have 4 elements of earth, water, fire and wind. A set of such statements came out. There is this reason. Ryan scratched his head in embarrassment, and then found Hermione's teasing eyes quickly looking at herself. But this is only a secondary reason. I wouldn't name it that way because it's so simple. You see, fireball will explode and burn. It's a range of attack magic. The wind dart has the smallest volume and the fastest attack speed. A good single attack magic. The ground stab technique can change the terrain and be used for sneak attacks. which can be regarded as the magic to limit the enemy. And the last water mist technique can form a large fog to cover the enemy's sight and absorb the fog. The voice of the middleman can be used to hide oneself or escape. So, it makes sense that you said you taught a set of magic. Hermione nodded. Although these magics are simple, they can meet most of the needs in combat, which is already great. That of course. It's not false that I have experienced so many battles. Ryan showed a proud look. So I will naturally choose the best path for everyone. In the last few days before Christmas, there was heavy snow for several days. The thick snow enveloped the world outside the castle, turning everything white, and even the window of the castle was frozen with ice. Hagrid, even if he had become a professor, still brought the 12 Christmas trees that are indispensable in the auditorium every year as usual. Holly and metal foil were wrapped around the stair railing, long candles flashed in the armor helmet, a large bunch of mistletoe hung in every section of the corridor. As the Ministry of Magic's struggle was known last year, there were always a lot of girls gathered under the mistletoe waiting for Harry to pass by alone. Fortunately, Harry's frequent night trips made him familiar with the secret passages in the castle, and he was able to bypass the route with mistletoe during the class with him alone without difficulty. Ginny loved and hated the situation now. She hated the girls who saw Harry like a hungry wolf found meat, but she was happy that Harry's time with him had increased. And Ron laughed every time he saw Harry's embarrassment. He used to be jealous when he was a single dog, but now he just looks at Harry's depressed face with joy. Ryan also discovered at this time that Lavender Brown, although occasionally nervous, was actually a very smart girl. For example, in the recent period, Ryan discovered that the girl didn't have the intimacy with Ron as in the original text, just like a pair of eels stuck together, but looked very reserved. But Hermione told Ryan that her roommate would be more outgoing when she was dating Ron alone. I think she hides sensitivity and anxiety under her passionate and bold behavior, so she is trying to adapt to the new role of Ron's girlfriend. For example, in non-private occasions, she will try to restrain her behavior and avoid causing us. It's better to have a relationship with Ron and wait for someone else's dissatisfaction. Hermione told Ryan on the way to the library for homework. At the end of the assignment, the two discussed the Christmas party at Slughorn. Because both of them received the invitation letter before, I actually asked to wear a formal dress to attend, which means that I need to wear high heels. I don't know why the wizards will learn the popular style of mules. After every time I go back to this formal party www.mtlnovel.com feeling sore. It's okay, today I'll get you a bottle of potion. After attending the party, you go back to the dormitory and wipe your feet to make sure you don't hurt immediately. Ryan comforted. But in any case, Christmas is still coming in anticipation, especially now that the overall environment has become increasingly tense. The school has tried its best to make the banquet rich before Christmas holidays, hoping to relax everyone. Naturally, such an evening will not disappoint everyone who stays in the school. Some gifts were placed under the 12 Christmas trees in the auditorium. Every student in school can get a copy. When the banquet started, Ryan chatted with the students around him, only to find that the students who stayed in the school this year's planned holiday were second only to the year when the ball was held in the 4th grade. This is because some parents chose to take their children to leave the UK. At the same time, another part of the parents think that Hogwarts Castle is the safest place in the UK in this case, and hope that the children can stay here as much as possible. After Professor Dumbledore spent less than 3 minutes to make a pre-Christmas blessing www.mtlnovel.com, some small programs were put on stage. Ryan also saw the performance of the Hogwarts chorus deleted in the movie. They sang the song Jingle Bells, and the small Professor Flitwick stood in front of everyone in a tuxedo wearing a black bow tie, and the command of the wide open arms was the only regret, because the song is relatively cheerful, so each member of the choir just beats with a small copper bell, and there is no harmony of toads. After that, the rich final meal made every little wizard enjoy, but it was a bit of a torment for the students who will go to the Slughorn party later, because they can't eat so much that they will be in front of many celebrities. Rude. This is especially true for girls wearing complex dresses and makeup. Ryan sees that Ginny can only give up the chicken legs like her brother Ron due to the makeup on her face, but can only eat some that can be cut with a knife, food in small pieces. Unlike the strict prohibition on makeup in Lane's last lifetime, in Britain, makeup is even a courtesy. If you didn't wear makeup when attending an important party, it will even be considered rude. Of course, this does not mean that you must wear heavy makeup, as long as it is suitable for yourself to participate in such parties. Near 8 o'clock, Ryan took Hermione away from the long table to prepare for Slughorn's party. At this time, Harry, Ginny and the people who had been invited also got up and left the auditorium. Hey, I wish you have a good time, Ron said vaguely, because his mouth was full of roast turkey. The same is true for you. Ryan waved goodbye to Ron before leaving the auditorium. Chapter 516, Dinner. Hermione wore a simple and elegant blood-red dress robe today. Her hair loosened a bun in the back of her head as she did at the Christmas ball. She used a hair of the same style but with a charm that was inlaid with a small piece of velvet white stone. The clip is fixed, and at the same time, the white and delicate neck is exposed, which looks very temperamental. I finally knew a benefit of strength improvement, Hermione said when the two went upstairs. I didn't like this kind of party before, because on this occasion, in order not to be rude in front of a group of people, there must be a perfect hairstyle. But my hair is more difficult to deal with. Last time I participated in this type of event, I used a lot of hair smoothing agents to get my hair done. But now, I only need to let the magic flow through my hair. Ryan felt a little speechless after listening to it, but it was a power to make him a god. It was really overkill for soft hair. When the two men walked to the corridor in front of Slughorn's office, they just saw Harry being greeted by Professor Slughorn while carrying Ginny. Thinking that the professor might be busy entertaining Harry at this time, Hermione took Ryan's outstretched arm up the marble steps and walked into Slughorn's office. Slughorn's office looks much larger than the outside. It's estimated that this is a seamless telescoping spell he temporarily released for this evening's party. But even if it's only a temporary measure, the office is still decorated with a very heart, the ceiling and emerald, crimson, and golden curtains hung on the walls, which looked like they were in a big tent. In the center of the ceiling is a golden lantern shining red in the room. There are still real elves flashing in the lights, and each elf is a bright spot. Welcome, welcome. Slughorn walked over wearing a poppy velvet hat that matched his smoking shirt. Looking at Harry's position and the smoking camera, he should be gangly took a group photo. Professor Slughorn, good evening. Lane and Hermione said hello. I welcome your arrival, Mr. Liang and Miss Granger. I wish you a good time tonight. I will leave first, because there are many guests who need me to entertain today. He said goodbye to Ryan and they went to introduced Harry to the guests. It must be said that although Slughorn is a little more utilitarian, he has a high rating in interpersonal communication shang shui. For example, he pays great attention to details and can give a good impression to everyone he wants to make friends with. Just like the pronunciation of Ryan's surname, he is rarely able to pronounce it accurately. Most other people's pronunciation is close to the cold pronunciation. In fact, Slughorn's attitude was also what Ryan hoped. After they came to a corner to pick up a glass of juice, they began to look at the whole party. As Slughorn said, there are indeed a lot of people here today. There is a loud song that sounds like a mandolin accompaniment in a corner in the distance. A few old witches talking. It was covered with a blue mist of the pipe. Some house elves walked through the thick silver plate in the jungle of the calf. In order to ensure the habit of not being discovered by the wizard during service, they covered their bodies with large tablecloths. Looks like a small roaming table. It's awful. Harry has been occupied by Professor Slughorn. I waited for a long time. The professor refused to let go. Just after Ryan stood by the table and drank half a glass of juice, Ginny squeezed out of the crowd. Then she picked up a glass of juice from the table and complained to Hermione. Your sweetheart is Professor Slughorn's most important and shining guest at this evening. Hermione sang after the elves in the world of the Lord of the Rings sang, and then laughed with Ginny. Ryan looked at this scene and slightly smiled at the corner of his mouth, and suddenly he felt a bunch of unfriendly eyes fall on the two girls. Hermione naturally discovered this at this time. She naturally put her right hand on her left wrist, and she seemed ready to take out the weapon from the space of the bracelet worn on her wrist at any time. When the two of them followed their eyes and found that they were looking at Hermione and Ginny as a tall, thin young man with dark circles under his eyes, a look of boredom. But now the young man looked at the two girls with a hungry look. Is the vampire? Ryan stepped forward and blocked the sight of the vampire from looking at the girls. He was also glaring at him. After all, it was now at the party or Professor Slughorn, so out of respect for the party's owner, Ryan felt just warned this impolite guy to stay away. But unexpectedly, the vampire screamed as if he saw something terrible after facing his eyes with Ryan's eyes, and then ran away several people and the table and chairs and ran directly out of the office. A small man with glasses standing beside him who had been chatting with Harry was stunned for a moment before shouting, "Xun, what are you doing?" But his shouts had no effect at all. The vampire had run out of the door at this time, turned a corner, and disappeared. The little man quickly apologized to those around him, and then ran out to find his vampire companion. Then Harry finally breathed a sigh of relief. After looking around, it was like Ryan and they came over. What happened just now? Ginny asked near Harry after handing Harry a drink. I don't know. Harry was also confused. These two people were introduced to me by Slughorn. The little guy with glasses is the author of Blood Brothers, I Live in a Vampire, de Warber, and the other one is his vampire friend Xweni. Just now, Warber is persuading me to write a biography of me, and I was in trouble when I was trying to get rid of him. While Harry was telling all of this, Volper also found the escaped in the corridor outside. Unexpectedly, when he found Xweni, the vampire was hiding himself behind a statue and shook his hands with his head. Jumped up like that. It's you, scared me to death. Xweni wanted to escape again, but he finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the face of the coming person. Then the whole person collapsed and leaned against the statue to start panting. What were you doing just now? Volper said angrily. We were able to meet many important people today. As a result, you messed up everything. Why did you just run? It's terrible. Xweni looked shocked. and then spoke to Volper. "You know, my sensitivity as a blood clan is higher than that of ordinary wizards. Just now I saw from the eyes of a young boy that at least a dozen blood clans' lives were buried in his hands, and many of them are stronger than me. It was terrified in an instant, so it just got out of control just now. At least a dozen? Shouldn't there be such massive vampire deaths in recent years? Wait. Is it 2 years ago in Romania?" Voppel opened his eyes and thought of a terrible fact. "Anyway, we need to say hello to Professor Slughorn for a while before we can leave. But you have to keep this in mind and you should not tell anyone because he chose to let these things become unsolved, so I believe that such a person would not mind killing a poor author and his vampire friend in order to protect his secret. I'm definitely not going to say it. As a blood clan, I know more about the power of people who can do things like genocide. You just give me a forgetting curse now," Xune said a little heartily. "Let's talk later after we say goodbye to the professor. I think I need to give myself a forgetting curse when I think about it," Voppel said with a shrug. Chapter 517. End of the party. Ryan didn't even know that he only glared at a vampire. The cleaning of the Romanian vampire family had already been discovered, and he even scared a writer and a vampire to death. After Harry came over, the four of them hid in the corner and began to taste the food tonight. Ryan had eaten a lot less at the previous Christmas banquet for this party tonight. Now it seems that it is totally worth it, because at this banquet he saw a lot of food that is usually very rare. For example, food made with some magical animals and magical plants as ingredients. Just as Ryan looked curiously at a whole roasted oily mouth with a dwarf pig stuffed with roasted apples, Harry was taken away by Professor Slughorn who had suddenly appeared for display. So there were only 3 people left by the small table in this corner. "I thought I could relax with Harry today," Ginny said uncomfortably after watching Harry and the fat professor crowd into the crowd. "You just have to take care of yourself and have fun. Harry will definitely go to the burrow during the Christmas holiday. By then you will have time to get along. So, try this mead, which seems to be caused by using special magic brews. Basically not drunk. I think it tastes good." Hermione picked up a wine glass filled with golden liquid and handed it to Ginny. "Thanks." Ginny took a sip of the glass and looked at the bottle on the table. 3 brooms have been aged for 15 years. I heard that the production is not large. My father told me that such a bottle requires 7 gallons and there is no price. Professor Slughorn is really too great for this party today. Generous. Ryan looked at the stack of bottles piled in the corner and had to admit that Ginny said something very reasonable. It can be seen that Slughorn can draw so many relationships and is not boring not only because he is a professor or he is very capable of being a person, but he can do it at the same time when he needs to spend money. Although everyone came here mainly for social purposes, even during this gathering, various foods were brought in from the outside. Now, for example, Ryan found that several house elves walked into the office with silver plates holding a plate of crimson meatballs, and one of them came right to Ryan's side. "Carla, what is this?" Ryan discovered that the house elf knew him. He occasionally came across the cleaning room in the common room when he came out to exercise in the morning. He also found that he walked a little limp. After the beginning of this semester, Ryan and several ghosts in the school who talked about it had made great progress in alchemy. After being able to help people in need, Nick, who had no head, volunteered to introduce it as an intermediary. He and several house elves with rheumatism or old injuries found Ryan to cure disease. Although the main purpose of Ryan's treatment of house elves at the time was to be able to study the house elves and test their alchemy pharmaceutical effects. But it is also real to help the house elves cure incurable diseases. After treating their injuries, they are very happy that they can devote themselves to labor. So Ryan naturally brushed up his reputation in the kitchen with admiration. "Ah, respectable Mr. Ryan." Carla clearly recognized Ryan. He put the plate on the side table and bowed deeply. "This dish is tart air dragon meatballs. It is a tender dish of fresh Ukrainian iron belly tenderloin chopped into small cubes, mixed with raw eggs, parsley cubes, pickled cucumber cubes, and seasoned with spices." "So is this raw?" Ginny asked in surprise. As Europeans, although they would not choose overcooked meat or fish in the choice of meat, they did not like raw food like Japanese people. So when I heard that the meatballs were raw, the 2 ladies seemed a little discouraged. "Yes," Kara said in a sharp tone peculiar to the house elves. "And the taste of this dish is very heavy. I just saw a person over there who was covering his nose when talking to others after eating. If you want to communicate with people for a while, this dish may not be suitable." After he finished speaking, he bowed again and then quit the office with other house elves. "Isn't it suitable to talk to someone after eating?" Just after the house elf left, Harry ran out of Slughorn again. After hearing the introduction of the house elf, he began to put meatballs in his mouth. It seems that he was really tired of being pulled around. "Potter, why are you hiding here? Slughorn is looking for you over there. By the way, this dish looks good." Cormac McLagan, who had been following Slughorn before as he walked over, he was well dressed and brushed his Malfoy's big back, and looked like a fish in such a social situation. He went to the plate and began to eat meatballs, and at the same time asked vaguely, "Do you know what we eat?" The house elf said that the ingredients in this dish are very precious. "Dragon Ball," Harry said calmly. After listening to Harry's words, Cormac froze in place, chewed twice subconsciously, and then suddenly turned and bent to spit out. As a result, Slughorn just happened to be on the other side of the table looking for Harry to say something. His face was red. His velvet hat was a little crooked. He had mead in one hand and Snape in the other. Cormac did not see them at all, turned his head and vomited and just spit Snape pants. At first Cormac hadn't discovered this, but when he spit out and slowly straightened his waist, he looked at the familiar dress in front of him, and the whole person was stiff like a plank. "Very well, you won a month's confinement for yourself, McLaggen." After Snape ignored it, McLaggen turned to look at Harry. "I listened to Slug. Professor Horn said an interesting joke. He said that you learned a lot from my class and made you a potion genius. But I don't think I taught you anything." "Then he inherited her mother's talent," Slughorn said. "I remember Lily back then." But he hadn't finished talking yet. www.mplnovel.com. There was a little confusion at the door, and then Draco Malfoy was approached by Filch's ear by the ear. "Professor Slughorn," Filch said whimperingly. The flesh on his chin was shaking. "I found this boy hiding in the hallway upstairs. It was against the discipline, because the principal said before without permission no messing around at night. So I want to ask if you sent him an invitation." "No, is that all right?" Malfoy looked angrily and flicked Filch's arm. "I did violate the school rules. Is that enough?" "It doesn't matter, Argus. It doesn't matter." Slughorn waved and said, "Christmas. It's not a sin to want to attend the party. Just forget it this time. Not an example." "Draco, you can stay." Malfoy immediately sorted out a smiley face to thank Slughorn for his generosity, and at the same time they talked about Malfoy's grandfather. But Ryan found Malfoy looked terribly mental, as if he had raided all night long before the final exam. "I have something to tell you, Draco," Snape said suddenly. "Oh, Severus," Slughorn said, burping again. "Christmas. Don't be too harsh on the children. I'm his dean, and it's up to me to decide whether to be strict or not." Snape said briefly, "Come with me, Draco." "I'm going to the bathroom." Watching Snape go away, Harry also made an excuse to squeeze out. But this time he went to the bathroom long enough. They didn't wait until Harry came back at the end of the whole party. Fortunately, when they returned to the common room collectively, they learned from the fat lady at the door that Harry had returned safely. Otherwise, Ginny will definitely sleep nervously tonight. Chapter 518, Emergencies. The day after the Christmas party at Slughorn, Hogwarts Express began to send some of its leaving students to London on a piece of ground that seemed to be white because of the thick snow. The red train locomotive brought a touch of light to this quiet ground. Malfoy and Snape talked quietly last night. "I think they must be preparing a conspiracy." At the inquiry of his girlfriend Ginny, Harry began to tell the 5 people sitting in the box what he heard last night. Snape seemed worried about Malfoy, but Malfoy dismissed him. Harry whispered to Ryan, Hermione, Ron, and Ginny who had come over. Snape thought Malfoy was expelled, but Malfoy said that Katie's control of soul charm had nothing to do with him. Then he talked about his learning of occlumency from Bellatrix, and about someone who gave him a job. Talking about that he does not need black magic defense. Snape said that he and Malfoy's mother made an unbreakable vow to protect Malfoy and will help him. By the way, Crabbe and Goyle are Malfoy's assistant. Unbreakable vows. Ron opened his eyes wide. Unbreakable vows can't be broken. Once broken, the result is death. When I was 5 years old, Fred and George wanted me to stand up. I almost stood up. Well, I already shook hands with Fred, and was discovered by my father. He was mad. This was the only time I saw my father get angry like his mother. So I think Malfoy must be doing something dangerous, evil, and Snape knows. Otherwise, they don't need to use the unbreakable oath. Harry finally concluded. "I think you're right." Ginny, who sat side by side with Harry, said tightly in his hand, "I believe you, Professor Snape. Shouldn't it be a conspiracy with Malfoy?" Hermione said hesitantly, and she was still more willing to believe in certain authorities. Not to mention that Professor Dumbledore trusted him. Of course. Looking at Harry with their uncomfortable eyes, Ryan shook Hermione's hand hard and then said, "Because we don't have any solid evidence to prove that Malfoy is actually doing anything evil, let alone conclusive evidence proves that Professor Snape is also part of the conspiracy. To know that Snape is a member of the Order of the Phoenix, without the support of detailed evidence, our allegations are inappropriate. But what we can't deny is..." Lane paused and said, "Malfoy must be doing something secretly in school, and Snape knows. In the current war, we do this thing the worst plan and preparation are also necessary. So Harry, you need to tell Professor Dumbledore this news when you next class." "That's right, Dumbledore is number one. I may have to talk to Daddy, Ron and Sirius." Harry should have come, and he waved his fist vigorously. Ron also wanted to say something at this time to express his support for his buddy, but a light knock was heard from the box door, and Ryan saw Lavender Brown waving at Ron through the glass window. Ron walked to the door after discovering her, and when they opened the door, the two whispered something, and Lavender left. "In short, Harry, I support you unconditionally," Ron said to Harry after sitting back, "and, you and Sirius, they will come to the Burrow earlier this year. Of course, I also hope Ryan and E-Minutes, you can come to the Burrow as a guest." On the next trip, Ron found an opportunity to leave the box. It seems that he should go to date Lavender at the last time before the holiday. Early the next morning, Ryan and they just finished their breakfast and were ready to pack up and go to the Norwegian plantation as planned. Rose Crystal suddenly came out of the Wonji grocery store and told them that some emergency happened. The family of Karen and Twilight sent us an urgent request for help, my brother. Just as Ryan and their baggage walked to the hall, the puppet suddenly jumped from a blue emitting space. The door flew out to speak, and then handed over a piece of paper. I found it from the same cottage we used to stay when I visited the world as usual, and they were looking for us through the contact information we left before we left. This piece of paper is actually a postcard. It only says that the Karen family is in some kind of fatal crisis and needs Ryan's help. I think we are going to see Lupin and their werewolves an hour later. Lane said, let's see what happened to the Karen family first. The two passed through the space door and came to the cabin in the world of Twilight. They happened to see Bree coming from outside. After seeing Ryan, he came over and said excitedly, "You are finally here. I thought you would not come." "What happened?" Hermione pulled Bree and asked. "We rushed over as soon as we saw your message." "That's it." Bree stabilized the excitement after seeing them and explained to them what happened recently. 5 minutes later, they finally figured out what happened recently. That is to say, because Bella's daughter Aname has now been discovered by the Volturi family, so they wanted to kill the baby under the name of a ban for self-interest. Is this true? After telling the story, Ryan summarized these things. "Yes." Bree nodded and said to Ryan, "That's why you need help. Although we have already found 17 people before, and also brought in the quiet werewolf. These and all the Tiri family still has a significant gap in strength. So I asked you for help." "We'll do our best," Hermione said. "It's really hard to tolerate killing an innocent baby for personal gain." "By the way, is the Karen family still living in the original house?" After receiving an affirmative answer, Ryan and their phantom appeared at the door of the Karen family's big house. The house looks full of people, and there are a few vampires in the woods outside the house who are practicing fighting. www.mplnovel.com including Bella and Edward. After discovering the sudden appearance of Ryan and them, a young woman with long blonde hair charged with electricity in her hands, while the man with brown skin on the other side who looked like a Middle Eastern man opened his hands and released a wind blade. "Stop, they are friends," Bella shouted after seeing the coming, but it was still late, and the attacks of the two vampires had arrived. But Ryan just waved his right hand gently, and the ring on the right hand gave a white light directly to the flying vampires and their attacks. In this way, it seemed that Bella said more to Ryan. Nice to see you." After a little explanation, Ryan and Hermione began to meet the vampires who came to help under the introduction of Bella, such as the electric shock female Kate, and Benjamin from Egypt who can manipulate natural elements. It was the man who released a wind blade. After learning that Ryan was the earliest provider of dragon's blood, these vampires all expressed their gratitude to Ryan because of the existence of dragon blood fruit. The chance of being discovered by humans has been greatly reduced. In addition, they were also shocked by Ryan's strength. "I can't believe that pure humans also have powerful powers comparable to vampires." After chatting for a few days, everyone returned to the Karen's house together, and Renesmee surprised Ryan and Hermione because in front of them is a little girl who looks 6 or 7 years old. "We seem to be away for only a few months." Hermione opened her mouth in surprise. "Does the vampire grow so fast?" "We don't know," Bella said, "because in theory, vampires don't have children. We don't know what this is all about." "For me, as long as Renesmee grows healthy, enough." Chapter 519, Peaceful Settlement. The next is the waiting days. Ryan and they can just take a closer look at the talent skills of these vampires. Of course, as a reward and a gift from friends, Ryan gave all the vampires a silver defense bracelet. After use, the vampires who came to help all raved about the silver bracelet. This is because the wizards themselves have a lot of research on the defense of various physical attacks, and most of the vampire battles are solved close to the body, and there is such a weapon that can provide enough defense in close combat. Get a great advantage in battle. Naturally, as a friend, Ryan also prepared the same defensive items for the werewolf, but in view of the large changes in body shape and the consumption of clothes when they were transformed, Ryan prepared for them a thick silver chain hanging around his neck, small version of the bracelet. Even if they transform into wolves, they can hang around their necks. The only not so good thing is that these people who are usually used to wearing only jeans and the Querut look less like good people. Of course, except for research. Ryan they also tried to fight these vampires. What frustrated the vampires was that they could not win the Ryan trio in the team fight, and even Rose Crystal could not win in the melee. Jill still likes to live in the body of Rose Crystal, even if it is a completely different new world. She can't attract her attention. It was just that one night, he was pulled out by Rose Crystal and pulled out and turned around. It has to be said here that Rose Crystal did bring itself into the role of mother, so it was only possible to work out the way of carrying out her house daughter. After a snowfall, the sun rises again and the Volturi family is coming. The vampires of the Karen family stood on the open ground where they were fighting the newborn legion, and the two wings were other family vampires who came to witness. The werewolf was arranged in the forest ready to attack. Ryan and they were arranged in the center of the werewolf legion, surrounded by Hermione with death black mist to cover all their breath. According to the prior arrangement, They will serve as the core reserve team and can freely decide the timing of the shot. At the same time, if the war is really irreversible, they still have the task of taking Renesmee away. But Ryan didn't think things would get there. In the morning light, there was movement in the woods on the north side, and a group of vampires poured out from the woods. They came in a strict and formal formation and moved together, but it was not like a march. They kept perfect synchronization. Sex emerges from the woods in a depressive, unbreakable formation. From a distance, it looks extremely spectacular, and it is even more beautiful. The formation of the Volturi family of vampires is grey on the outermost side, and then the color of the clothes on each layer gradually darkens from the outside to the inside, until the darkest black in the center of the array. Each face was covered in shadow by the cloak. The speed of travel is slow and cautious, with an invincible temperament. It feels like Death Eaters are like street hooligans compared to them. Looking at the solemn sight in front of her, Hermione made her own assessment. They are vampires, and they have been together for at least 200 or 300 years. This is much stronger than the crowd of people gathered by the mysterious people. Lane thought of Voldemort's scum from all over Europe. After the previous battle, he thinks that the core Death Eaters of Voldemort's level are indeed good, but the level of Dross after the resurrection is obviously uneven. There are indeed good wizards, but most of them are a group of guys of the same level as most of the staff of the Ministry of Magic who can't even put out an armor curse, but they dare to hurt people. Are you going to fight? Hermione whispered that Ryan found out that the Edwards who had been negotiating before and the head of the Volturi family, Arrow, had separated and returned to their own camps. Some neutral vampires left, and the two parties prepared to fight had prepared for battle. For example, the werewolves who had just walked out of the forest had all opened the magic defense on their bracelets. Ryan and Hermione glanced at each other and nodded. Then a circular magic circle appeared under their feet. This magic array is one of the results of their previous research. Through the arrangement of the magic crystal and the mithril in advance, the magic effect and perception ability of the people in the magic circle can be improved. The only flaw is that this thing now needs the power of the earth, so it cannot be moved while in use. It can only be useful in a world that lacks long-range attack capabilities. However, at this time, Alice suddenly walked out with two vampires who looked to the natives of South America. Surprisingly, after they had a conversation with Arrow, the people of the Volturi family were like a tide back to the forest. The next time, as the local masters, Bella and Edward said goodbye to everyone and sent everyone away. Thank you so much this time, Edward said to Ryan when he said goodbye to Ryan. The powerful force you prepared in the forest just now is one of the important reasons why the Volturi family chose to leave. The members of the Volturi family were strongly shocked and their confidence was destroyed. But, yes, I'm sure they will make a comeback, and I think they will try to break us all. It doesn't matter. Ryan shrugged his shoulders. You will come to inform us when the time comes. We promise to completely solve their problems, and we are now on the road to immortality. Whenever you encounter difficulties, we are all willing to lend a helping hand. Please don't forget to inform us when the time comes. Yes, my friend, we will. We will definitely win the next real war. Edward smiled and hugged Ryan. Then they left. But at the time of the departure, Rose Crystal promised Renesmee that she would come to visit her when she was free. The little guy now has his own friends. Ryan smiled like an old father. The little puppet started to have her own private life, which represented her another step towards evolving into a truly independent soul. Where are we going next? After Myriad returned to the cabin, Hermione asked Ryan to come. We have a day off today. www.mplnovel.com. Let's go back tomorrow. Ryan said. I feel a little tired after the 2 days of research and today's preparation. What do you think? I'm also a little tired of you. Hermione nodded. So it's a good idea to take a night's rest. We just happened to be able to attend the werewolves campfire party, and their barbecue is really delicious. So that night Ryan participated in the meeting of the Quiet Werewolves, and by the way, helped them solve the problems they encountered in practice recently. In this way, I played very late that night, causing me to get out of bed at more than 9 o'clock the next morning. After packing up the experimental data this time, Ryan returned to the Wanji grocery store. This trip to other worlds was originally thought to be an emergency rescue operation, but the last thing was resolved peacefully, which is equivalent to a trip to nothing. Of course, this is a good thing. Why should we bleed to solve things that can be solved? Moreover, Ryan is not at a loss. For example, he found a way to get close to the elements of nature from Egypt's Benjamin, which was summarized by him as a spellcasting feat. After mastering this specialty, the release of elemental magic will be smoother than usual, and the power will increase by about 1/5 at the same time. After returning to the world of Harry Potter, Ryan took their luggage and went to London. They planned to take the international flyway network here to spend the next holiday in Norway. After all, their family is not around. After thinking about it, they found that they can really go to this family holiday except for a few places. Apart from fellow scholars, this group of werewolves gathered. Chapter 520, North Base. In the vast pristine jungles of northern Norway, there was thick snow everywhere, and there was silence. But soon a burst of laughter broke the silence here. Ha! What do you think? Isn't it much better than when I was driving? A girl's voice said that at this time two figures appeared on the path in the forest, and they slid quickly on the sled. Okay, Hermione, I admit that I have a problem with my preparations today, but who can think of anyone here who doesn't sweep the snow? Ryan waved his ski poles helplessly. They would have come out of the nearest fireplace. He was about to drive to the plantation. Ryan also drove out the car he bought last time when he was traveling in Russia. As a result, he found thick snow on the road after he left the town. He found the road a few kilometers after he left the city. The snow is the same as the previous snow accumulation did not sweep. The result is that after the first snow in winter, all the snow is piled up on the road, with a full waste. At the same time, the snow at the bottom is turned into ice due to repeated melting and solidification. As a result, this road is no longer suitable for driving in cars. This kind of unmanned road itself will not have someone to sweep the snow. Hermione said, those snowplows will only take care of the places that connect the large gathering points. However, you don't think that two people ski together like this? Does it feel great? Of course it feels great to ski, right? Ryan suddenly thought of something when the road was blocked. What do you say about the people in the plantation at this time? Where did their supplies come from? I remember that for the sake of safety, the fireplace in the plantation was not connected to the flyway network. Don't forget that although they are werewolves, many of them are professionally trained wizards. Hermione said helplessly. Anyway, there is enough food and growing vegetables in the plantation. They only need to select a few people every time and apparel to the nearest city to purchase some daily necessities. After 20 minutes, they came to the door of a large plantation. After knocking on the door, a former werewolves came out to open the door for them and greeted them. Ah, nice to meet you. We are also very happy to see you. By the way, where are the others? Lane asked after entering the door. They are staying in the underground breeding ground except for those who need to work outside. They are in class. Werewolf as a guard said, I will also teach others after a shift. After saying goodbye to the guards, they walked into the door, and a large greenhouse appeared in front of them. Most of the area was mainly planted with ordinary flowers, and a small part was planted with some vegetables and fruits for these houses, used by people in the plantation. I thought the magic plants were planted in the greenhouse next to it, but now it looks no different from a normal greenhouse farm. Hermione said to Ryan after seeing the scene in the greenhouse through some glass on the greenhouse. Of course not. Ryan shook his head with a smile. This plantation is a legal plantation in the world of ordinary people. It is also a perfect disguise. The real plantation is at our feet. Underfoot? Hermione asked puzzled. Yes. Lane nodded. It is the underground breeding farm that the guard said just now. Only below the ground can we create a stable space with magical elements at the minimum cost. At the same time, with the protection of the earth, the magical reaction here can be suppressed to a minimum, which is difficult. We were discovered by others. It's a smart approach, Hermione said with admiration in her tone. You can't be too cautious in this war era. At this time they had walked to the farm building, but instead of walking directly into the main building, they turned a corner into the garage next door. After entering the garage, they shook off the snowflakes. Hermione looked around the garage and asked, where did you hide the way down? I didn't feel the corresponding magical reaction in this house. You have forgotten that there are other ways to achieve various purposes besides magic in this world. This time it was Ryan's turn to explain to Hermione what she had not thought of. Think about the large laboratory under our manor. The building construction parts are modular. Even wizards with a low level of science and technology can splice them together like building blocks in a short time. Speaking of which, Ryan gently pushed a toolbox placed on the shelf. A small machine tool on the side slid sideways to reveal a downward staircase. This is a purely mechanical mechanism. At least that group of Death Eaters are guys who use their wants as little as possible. They despise everything that is not magic in their eyes. Naturally, they also treat this purely mechanical type. I don't know how to control them. My design is also a blind spot for using their psychological thinking. After walking down the stairs to a depth of about 2 floors and passing a door, they took the elevator to the underground cultivation ground. Unlike the metal-toned fortress beneath his manor, this place is like a forest. After opening the door, this is very similar to the large botanical garden in the Brazilian school we went to the second year. Hermione walked out of the elevator and looked around and said, it doesn't feel that much about plant species. You are right. Ryan nodded proudly. The inspiration I got from the when I designed it, and then through a series of calculations, a small magic ecosystem was formed here. Under the care of those werewolves, the magic herbs produced in the core area here are not inferior in quality. The common wild pharmacy also serves as our fist product for exporting to Tankau. The uncle also wrote to me 2 days ago telling me to let me increase my output with confidence, and they can eat as much as we produce. Why are those pureblood families not doing this? Hermione found out that there was a problem she couldn't figure out in Ryan's words. I don't believe they can't see the profits here. The problem is cost. Ryan gave his hand. The core of this planting model is the micro-ecosphere www.mtlnovel.com, but in fact, because of the problem of scale, This can only be regarded as a pseudo-ecosphere that cannot complete the internal cycle purely by its own power. In order to maintain the magic ecosystem, the operation requires that the grower is at least a formal wizard, and these wizards are best able to feel the power of nature. Then they can use magic at any time to adjust the balance in this ecosystem. Obviously, the group depends on the pureblood family of house elves. Performing planting tasks can definitely not do this. Even after hiring a wizard, their wizard is not a rival to the new werewolf in the sense of nature. This is the secret of our unique business and the werewolf, the foundation for the future. Ryan was right. There was a familiar voice in the bush, and then the branches in front moved Lupin out of the bush. So everyone also sees this as their own home, because only here can everyone reflect their value. It seems that all werewolves like it very much. Lane smiled and said hello. Nice to meet you, Professor Lupin, and Merry Christmas. I am very happy to see you. You are here this time. Professor Lupin looks much younger in a green wizard's robe, and his temperament is much better than that of Lockhart wearing similar clothes. We are here to celebrate Christmas with everyone, Hermione said. Just don't know if everyone here welcomes us. How could it not be welcomed? Lupin smiled broadly. Everyone is looking forward to your coming, but I feel that this festival belongs to family members, and I am worried that you will not be with strangers. Chapter 521, Werewolves. When Ryan walked along the path through a few trees to the cabin where the living area was located, he found that Lupin's description could not describe the wolf people finding themselves happy with them at Christmas. Every werewolf who found Ryan would come up to hug or shake his hand excitedly. Ryan felt that he was now treated like Harry after he first entered the Broken Cauldron bar in the first grade. Soon they came outside a room in the living area, and through the glass windows on the wall, they could see what a middle-aged werewolf was talking on the table, and there were 11 or 2 werewolf students listening. But, except for the little girl Mary who was sitting in the front row, listening carefully with a smile, everyone else had an expression of irresistible expression. What class are you taking here? Ryan asked curiously, because in the class he couldn't figure out what to teach. There would be adults and children mixed in the class. Grammar class. Lupin looked helpless. A lot of werewolves were abandoned by their families when they were young. After testing, we found that they even had problems with reading and writing, so we had to literacy. In addition, other scattered problems were encountered during this time. Too much. What caused these troubles? Hermione asked. Because we are the first and maybe the only group of good werewolves that have gathered together in nearly 100 years of history. Lupin smiled bitterly. Now we have 37 people, which includes most of the good werewolves and the British. A part of the good werewolves in other European countries. After gathering together, we had to live alone for safety reasons. We must learn how to survive and the team. In this way, there will be countless problems. Fortunately, everyone hopes that this collective, if we can continue to improve, we are willing to make concessions, and our group is slowly maturing. Lean felt a little embarrassed looking at the tired Lupin in front of his eyes. After all, now the idea of bringing the werewolves together is out of their own hands, but because they are going to school, Lupin needs to deal with everything here. Lupin saw Ryan's thoughts. He smiled and waved his hand. Don't blame yourself, doing this job is a great thing for me, and this time is also my happiest for me time. Listening to Lupin's words, Ryan smiled, and he was right. At least Ryan found that Lupin could no longer find the sad look in the past. Although he looked tired but motivated, his eyes were full of hope. Oh, where are you going to celebrate this Christmas? I remember the Weasley family Christmas banquet not only invited us to, but also invited you and Tunks. Ryan asked. Sure to stay here, Lupin said seriously. I used to go to another place for Christmas because I didn't have a home, and now this is my home. Tunks will come to see me at Christmas this year, and there are some that haven't been broken before with her. Contact the relatives and friends of the werewolf. By the way, what about the 2 of you? I remember your relatives are not in the UK now. We will also spend the entire holiday here, without seeing us bring all the luggage. Hermione patted herself on a small bag with the high-level seamless extension spell. Here is half of our house. Next to Christmas, Ryan stayed here to communicate with the werewolves, and healed the werewolves at the rate of 2 people a week. At the end of Christmas Eve, when Ryan and Hermione were exhausted from the treatment room, the number of werewolves treated had reached 18, which exceeded the number of werewolves in Quelat. Thank you very much, it was really hard work. After going out, a large group of werewolves shouted in 2 rows at the entrance of the treatment room, and bowed deeply. Ryan felt very touched, and Hermione even had some sparkles in the corners of her eyes. We heard that Orientals express their gratitude in this way, so we express our gratitude in this way. At this time, everyone started walking towards the restaurant, explained to Ryan at Lupin Station, and Hermione was pulled to the side by Tunks without knowing what to mutter. Well, it's normal for Europeans to distinguish the cultural differences between several countries in the Far East, not to mention that most of the group in front of them is the wolf people who have been housed before. Ryan feels as long as he has that heart. The form is not important. Soon, they came to a brightly lit hall. The whole hall is decorated with colorful. In the center of the hall is placed a small but full of brightly decorated Christmas tree. Before dinner, Lupin gave a short speech to nearly 50 werewolves, wizards and moles. In his speech, he finally spoke about the recent situation. It is well known that the forces of evil have returned. There are those evil, murderous werewolves headed by Grey Burke, and there are a group of black wizards who are more cruel and murderous than these werewolves. They are definitely not will allow werewolves like us who are not on their side to exist. In short, at this time, we must be united and remain vigilant, while keeping our motto in mind. At this time, all the werewolves stood up, and under the guidance of Lupin, they lowered their voices and read, "Snow falls, the wind blows, the lone wolf dies, and the wolves live forever." Are you going to take everyone into this war? Even if the scale of this war is bigger and crueler than last time? After the banquet, sitting in Lu while everyone gathered together in twos and two for tea and snacks, Ryan asked beside Ping. Actually, we cherish our present life very much, and we don't want to be involved in the war. But now it is clear that the choice of whether to participate in this war is not in our hands. It is better to do it better than to be passively involved in the war. Everything is ready. Lupin paused at this point, as if thinking about what to say next. Do you have any worries? Ryan keenly discovered Lupin's hesitation. He asked in a low voice. That's it. All wolves including me want to cooperate with you in the war. Lupin seemed a little cramped when he said this, because he felt that the war had not yet reached the time when a miner like Brian bleeds. www.mtlnovel.com. But the wolf people who have been isolated for a long time need human comrades who can fight alongside them, and the only wizards that can be recognized by all werewolves here are Ryan and Hermione. At the same time, the treatment of the werewolves by the two of them also shows that they are powerful enough to undertake the work that should be undertaken by adults. So Lupin hesitated to tell the story again and again. Why not cooperate with Dumbledore? Ryan asked. He should be stronger and more prestigious than me. If it is me personally, I definitely choose to cooperate with the principal. But now I am responsible for all the wolf people here. Lupin seemed depressed. Even in the Phoenix Society, most wizards still don't trust the werewolves. The same werewolves don't trust those wizards, and you are our only candidate. If this is the case, I will be happy to take on this responsibility. Although I may not be able to guarantee how much they will win, I will try to bring them back alive. Lane is very happy that the werewolves are willing to join this under their own command. In a war, previously, the reliable manpower available to Ryan was Rose Crystal, Jill and Hermione. Even if the action can cause a certain loss to the enemy, but in the face of many tragedies but unable to stop. Now that there are werewolves, Ryan feels that he can definitely play a greater effect under such a manpower situation. Let my compatriots be able to go home alive is my biggest goal. I believe you can do it, Lupin said with a firm grip of Ryan's hand. Chapter 522. The holiday is over. On the 5th day after the new year, Ryan, who had breakfast, went to the burrow together with Lupin, because the Ministry of Magic will arrange a one-time flyway network connection tomorrow so that students can return to school quickly and safely. Oh, you're finally here, hurry in. As soon as they walked into the garden of the burrow, Mrs. Weasley greeted them, and then ushered them into the house. Stay just at breakfast. A lot of snacks have been ordered. Would you like to order them? Thank you, but no more. We have had breakfast before we came. Hermione politely declined Mrs. Weasley's kindness. Lupin then stayed below to talk to Mrs. Weasley, and Ryan and they went upstairs to find Harry and them. At the stairs of the 3rd floor, Hermione turned directly to find Ginny, while Ryan went up to the 5th floor to the door of Ron's house. After knocking on the door opened. It was Harry who opened the door, and Ron looked like he had written something on the edge of the table, now holding a quill pen and turning his head to look in the direction of the door. "Ha, you are finally here." After Ryan entered the door, Harry and Ron stepped forward to hug him, and Ron continued, "I thought you and Hermione would not be here this Christmas." "Since I promised, I will definitely come," Ryan said after sitting on the edge of the bed. "By the way, you two don't seem to be very happy. What did you encounter this holiday? Can you tell me something?" "That's it." Harry and Ron nodded slightly after looking at each other, and then Harry said, "I told Mr. Weasley before I heard the news in the hallway, but he felt I was a little nervous. He thinks that the conversation between Snape and Malfoy is pretending to help in order to discover what Malfoy is doing. I should believe Professor Dumbledore's judgment and believe Snape." "What about Sirius?" Ryan asked Harry's godfather. "Sirius absolutely supports Harry's opinion," Ron said beside him. "But this doesn't make much sense, because Sirius thought from the beginning that Snape was a black wizard and a Death Eater, and after the castle's magic alert level increased, he couldn't go to school to do anything." "It sounds terrible." "This means that we need to fight alone in this respect." "But Harry, you don't have to worry," Lane said, looking up at Harry's face standing in the middle of the room. "I can give you as much help as I can in this matter, such as some alchemy props that can be used in castles." "Thank you so much, buddy." Ron came over and patted Ryan on the shoulder. "This may require you to spend a lot of money, because there is a lot of defensive magic in Hogwarts Castle. If you want to use certain types of alchemy props, the cost of materials will be high." This Harry seemed a little helpless, and he had been a little guilty about Ryan's reluctance to help him in the end. But after hearing Ron say this, he immediately realized that Ryan actually helped him a lot. What I just thought was very inappropriate. After all, Ryan had a lot of work for the Phoenix this semester, and he didn't have much time to do other things. Now it is a very big favor to give him alchemy props with the large capital. You don't have to worry about this. Ryan put on a proud look. You know, as a good alchemist, worldly money will never be lacking. It sounds enviable, Ron said with a grin. By the way, thank you for the Christmas gift you gave me this year. This kind of wizard robe with automatic cleaning and basic defense is really awesome. I think Fred and George have 10 gallons for such a wizard robe. What? Me too. Thank you for the wizard's robe you gave me, Harry said. Yes, Rufus Scrimgeour came to me before and told me a lot of things. For example, Ryan asked in a long tone. He first told me that Umbridge confessed what she did last year and chose to exile himself in Northern Europe. Having said that, with a smile on Harry's face, it seemed that he was satisfied with Umbridge's departure. But soon his face was calm again. He showed me this way first, then he thought I had an obligation to cooperate with the Ministry of Magic. Duty? Ryan frowned when he heard the word. You know, I have read a lot of books, and more books are specifically about obligations. It says that obligations and rights should correspond. I just want to know what rights the Ministry of Magic can give you. Nothing, only to help me introduce a few big men in the Ministry. Harry was a little angry. I just tried to tell him that I didn't like certain things the Ministry did, such as imprisoning Stan Sampak. But he immediately changed his face, thinking that I was only 16 years old, and I didn't understand many things. Tell me that the situation is now dangerous and certain measures are necessary. Another politician who determines his brain, and his brain is similar to his butt. Ryan sighed. If it was Slughorn who would definitely accept this opportunity to know a big man, but Harry was an upright person and couldn't get used to its set. Actually, the Death Eaters on the periphery are not hard to find and hard to catch. But as the Minister of Magic, he is not willing to offend those pureblood families that are the cornerstones of the Ministry of Magic at this time. Glancing at Harry and Ron with his indignant colors on his face, www.mplnovel.com, Ryan then said in a plain tone, of course, I can understand the avoidance of infighting during the war, and I can do something to encourage morale, understand. But in this case, I really don't understand why he had to catch a few innocent people as scapegoats. Obviously there are many really evil black wizards in Diagon Alley. It's not difficult to catch a few from there. Yeah, I also think it would be better if the black wizards who had wounded people in Upside Down Alley were stuffed into Azkaban. So I refused his invitation and he said that I was a downright Dumbledore-esque people, Harry said, spreading his hands. Then the two of us fell apart, but I still feel a little guilty in my heart. After all, he still drove Umbridge away. You don't have to be guilty. Ryan looked at Harry. Although Harry was naive and emotional in many places, but he was an honest and kind person. This is why Ryan is willing to make friends with him. He whispered to Harry and Ron. I know why Umbridge didn't come back, but this involves Lupin, so I hope you can keep it secret. After watching Harry nod there solemnly, Ryan said, this is how it is then. Ryan whispered how Umbridge tried to kill Liang Gong and got killed by counterattack, but nothing talk about the treatment of the werewolf, because Lupin believes that even if it is public, it is necessary to wait for the treatment of all werewolves on the plantation. I knew that the Ministry of Magic and Umbridge would not suddenly become good people, as the saying goes. The fox will turn grey, but it will never get better. Ron listened to Ryan after hearing say first. But this is also a good thing, Harry said with a smile. I can now be a Dumbledore's person all through. Chapter 523, New Semester. After staying at Weasley's house for one night, Linen lined up by the stove in the burrow kitchen the next afternoon to prepare to return to Hogwarts. This is much more comfortable than squeezing to King's Cross Station with a group of people to take a date train. Only Mrs. Weasley saw them off, because Mr. Weasley, Fred, George, Percy, Bill, and Fleur all had to work, and Mrs. Weasley wept when she said goodbye. Ginny stepped forward to hug her and gently patted her back to comfort her. Don't cry, Mum. Then Mrs. Weasley and each of them hugged and said goodbye. Ryan felt her hug was very hard. Naturally, he was so excited about Mrs. Weasley. In this wartime, it was indeed a matter of concern to stay away from the children for so long, let alone hear the news of someone missing. I've always been like this, Mrs. Weasley. Mrs. Weasley and Harry embraced for the longest time. Harry comforted her until, I like a quiet life, you know. After hearing this sentence, Mrs. Weasley smiled with tears and stepped back. So, well, each of you. When it was Ryan's turn, he bowed to Mrs. Weasley and shouted Hogwarts, then surrounded by flames and quickly spun up. After seeing many fireplace doors along the way, he turned slow down and stopped right in Professor McGonagall's fireplace. Good afternoon, Professor McGonagall, Ryan said, pulling out his wand and waving it. All the ash in the fireplace and on the carpet disappeared. Good afternoon, Mr. Liang. This silent mantra is very good. I am very happy to see that you have not forgotten my homework during the holidays. Probably because just after Christmas, Professor McGonagall had a good holiday and also seemed to be more than it was easier before. Ryan stood outside the fireplace and sorted out her robes. Hermione also appeared in the fireplace. She also stepped out of the fireplace and used a silent spell to clean up the ash brought, and walked out of Professor McGonagall's office with Ryan toward Gryffindor to the tower. Ha, Lion, I finally waited for you. After climbing up the tower on the glow of the hallway, They happened to meet Neville. Neville said to Len that he waved a note on his hand when he saw him. Professor Dumbledore asked me to sign this note to you. By the way, the password at the entrance of the common room today is to quit drinking. After accepting the parchment stacked together and thanking Neville, Lane opened the parchment. The content above is very simple. Dumbledore asked Ryan to go to his office tomorrow afternoon. He had something to tell Ryan. What did the principal ask you to do this time? Wasn't the disagreement the last time you taught magic to the students? After returning to the common room, Ryan showed the note to Hermione. Hermione told Dumbledore felt strange to find Ryan again. I guess it's a task, Ryan said with a thought. After the last incident at the end of the Ministry of Magic, don't you think Dumbledore still thinks that I am at the same level as the ordinary little wizard? In this way, the principal will definitely want to use it when the Phoenix Society is seriously understaffed every point of strength. It is impossible for him to keep me a level guy who keeps touching fish. It's true, the Christmas break has just passed. Hermione complained a little, and Lane thought her expression was a bit like that of Mrs. Weasley when the Ministry of Magic asked Mr. Weasley to work overtime yesterday. The door opened at this time. Harry pulled Ginny over, and the two sat on the sofa opposite Ryan and them. How about Ron? Ryan asked, looking at the two in front of him, but Ginny pouted. I went to Lavender as soon as I came back. It is estimated where the two of them are dating now. Understood. Ryan nodded, as he did when he first fell in love. Afterwards, he learned from Harry in the chat that Dumbledore will teach Harry tomorrow night. It seems that this is probably because Dumbledore will be able to stay in school for a day tomorrow, and he will simply put all the things to be dealt with at once. At the beginning of the new semester the next morning, the 6th graders got a surprise. They found out when they were ready to have breakfast. A big notice was pinned on the notice board in the common room the night before. I told you that the Phantom Appearance lesson is about to begin. If someone has reached the age of 17 or is 17 on August 31st, they can attend a 12-week Phantom Visualization course taught by the Ministry of Magic Phantom instructor. A blank is left at the bottom of the notice, which is for the signature of willing participants. Ryan and Hermione had learned this when they last went to Tankel, but this time they still signed up to sign up. Just like your driving skills are very good, but if you want to go on the road normally, you still need to get a driving license. Over the next day, many 6th graders gathered to discuss the appearance of phantoms. Harry was surrounded by several people because he was moved by Dumbledore with a phantom. Many people are very excited about this matter, and even some people are overexcited. For example, because Simo was immersed in the dashing image after mastering this magic, the magic wand was too strong when he released the fresh water like a spring in the curse class, and he changed the spell homework that day. Hinkwin turned into a water dragon, shot at the ceiling and bounced down. www.mplnovel.com was hitting Professor Flitwick's face. As a result, after Professor Flitwick got himself dry, Simone won a penalty package for himself. He needs to copy the sentence I am a wizard, not a baboon swinging his stick. This incident shows that in Britain, when people are stupid, they say someone is a baboon. Ryan felt that the author of a novel he had read in his previous life was indeed careful, but unfortunately the author passed through before he finished writing it. Now he can only pray for a certain urban drama world that the world's grocery stores can connect to. He can read the whole book. Thinking about all the missing things after dinner, Lane came to the principal's office again. This time he hadn't knocked on the door opened, and the layout in the room was exactly the same as last time, while Dumbledore was looking at the meditation basin on the table in front of him. After discovering that Ryan entered the door, the principal raised his head and greeted him. I'm sorry to call you again, but I have a very important thing to find you. I'm happy to do everything I can to help you. Ryan nodded slightly. But my main strength comes from alchemy. I'm afraid I can only drag your hind legs in real face-to-face battles. Don't worry, it's not your turn to go to the battlefield anyway. Dumbledore smiled. You contribute more to the production of various props in the rear than in the last battle. There is no shortage of warriors who can fight the Death Eaters in the Phoenix Society, but they can provide everyone with enough help to make everyone more likely to come back alive. There is only you, and I need your help. That is, alchemy. Then I am honored. Ryan said, now can you tell me what I need to do? Dumbledore sat there thinking about it, then whispered a word. Ryan's eyes widened instantly. Chapter 524, Plan. Principal Dumbledore, were you kidding? Ryan asked Dumbledore aloud after hearing Dumbledore's hope that he would do something. Or I just had auditory hallucinations, and the place we are going to may not be the one you said. Calm down, Ryan. I thought you would be able to face everything calmly when you came back from behind that stone arch. Dumbledore pressed his hands gently, indicating Ryan to keep quiet. You did get it right. I want you to accompany me to one of the strongest vaults in the ground floor of Gilling Pavilion, and then take something out of it. Ryan didn't know how to answer this. He really didn't expect Dumbledore to come to him just to grab the bank. This is not a bit more than Dumbledore's incomparable rules. It's not as you imagine robbing a bank. If it goes well, no one will be hurt by this matter. Dumbledore seemed to know what Ryan was thinking. He explained the reason in the next sentence. Because of the last pendant box and ring, I realized that hoard made by Voldemort was definitely not a small one. After considering that he could give Lucius Malfoy his own Horcrux, I think he might give him the #1 player under Bellatrix Lestrange as a Horcrux. Then why do you think the Horcrux is in the Gilling Pavilion? Ryan asked. Because Harry in the original text they were because of Bella's excessive panic after knowing that they had been to the Goulange Vault, which made Harry guess that it was a coincidence caused by the aura of Harry Potter's protagonist. Dumbledore hadn't experienced this at all now, and Ryan wanted to know how accurately he guessed that a Horcrux was placed in Bella's vault. Because Voldemort trusted Bellatrix and her husband. They were the most loyal servants before he fell, and he went out to look for him after he disappeared. In this case, Voldemort would hide his Horcrux in them. Understandable, Dumbledore said with a cross of his fingers, looking at Ryan. Of course, Voldemort does not completely trust anyone in his bones. I think that the Horcrux is probably a treasure of the same level as the Slytherin pendant box or the Resurrection Stone ring. He is handing his Horcrux to him. When Bella, it's very possible to tell them that such a thing is a reward for their loyalty. At this point, Dumbledore looked at Ryan with an interesting eye. In this case, you think Bellatrix what will she do? Hidden in the Gilling Pavilion. Ryan reacted at once, and Bella, as Voldemort's most loyal running dog, would certainly not throw such things around, and there was a high possibility of throwing those before she set off to attack the Longbottons. The important things are put in the ancient vault because at that time she would have a hunch that she would be captured soon after the attack. Under such circumstances, she would definitely not taint other people's hands with the treasure given to her by her master. The independent status and strong protection of Gilling Pavilion ensure this. Very good. Dumbledore nodded slightly. You know why I'm going to Gilling Pavilion now. As far as safety is concerned, you don't have to worry about it. I can definitely bring you out intact. As far as I know, Voldemort in the first grade, I was able to reach the core vault of the Gilling Pavilion and retreat with a torn body. I can guarantee that my level is not worse than him at this point. Ryan nodded after listening to this sentence. The only reason he didn't get the Horcrux before he knew it was because he didn't feel confident that he would break through the defense of Gilling Pavilion without disturbing others. At that time, he thought that the only foolproof way was to blow up several large equivalent nuclear bombs in the radiation world. But this would lead to the complete destruction of the wizarding economy. He felt that there was no need to use this collateral damage at the last minute. Great tactics. Okay, now that you have agreed to this matter, you need to be prepared when you go back. When you are ready, you can write to me and let me buy it for you. At least I think I have a lot. The place still allows them to take out the good stuff. As far as I know, a master alchemist who wants to exert his full strength is based on sufficient raw materials and props. You must not sorry. As for the action time, I will notify you. Okay. I know, Lane replied. But after the response, Dumbledore did not let him leave as he thought. The principal looked at Ryan for a few seconds and then asked in a slow tone, I know there is something I can't worry about, but I still want to ask you, how have you studied about the Voldemort Horcrux on Harry? Seeing Ryan seemed to be hesitant after hearing this problem, Dumbledore quickly added, of course, this is not an urgency to you. I understand that this work is not so easy to solve in a short time. If you don't said here he was stunned because Ryan took a crown inlaid with blue gems from the space bag around his waist. This is the crown of Ravenclaw. I have successfully stripped and completely erased the soul of the mysterious man on it. The crown has also restored its previous functions, but it can only be regarded as a powerful magic prop. Does not make people have wisdom. The real wisdom is Ravenclaw himself. Now I return it to Hogwarts. You did it? Dumbledore looked straight at the crown on the table and sat straight up, took out his old wand and clicked on the crown to check it. He raised his head and asked in shock. So, Harry, sorry, I'm still not sure. Ryan lowered his head. The reason why he took the crown out at this time was to hope that Dumbledore could grasp the information of this Voldemort Horcrux in order to be more perfect in the following layout. At the same time, he handed this pot to the principal. As for the study of Harry's body of Voldemort's soul, he has no way to guarantee Harry 100%. At this time, it is convenient for the principal to see the research results and get some resources that are not usually available in the next time. Because in the previous resource collection, Ryan found that he was a weak wizard in the magic world as a hemp breed, and there are many good things. They only circulate among the high-level wizards, and he cannot buy such a wizard even if he has money. Dumbledore's face is different. It's okay, I can understand it. Dumbledore shook his hand after hearing Ryan's apology. You don't need to apologize. I also have some research on alchemy, and understand that living and dead are completely different. You don't have to worry. At least, we still have enough time now. It seems that the current attitude of Dumbledore and the headmaster of this period in the novel is completely different. Dumbledore at this time in the novel has only 1 year left because he has been caught in the trap of Voldemort. www.mplnovel.com. Everything seems very impatient, and even entrusts some important things to fate, giving people the feeling that the whole person is in a low mood. Now Dumbledore, who was in good condition and found several Voldemort's Horcruxes, was full of optimism. Of course, from this incident, Ryan saw that Dumbledore is now a really good person. Many people in his life described him as a man who calculated everyone for his inner goal, and even raised Harry just to let him die at the last moment. But after coming to this world to experience it for himself, Ryan felt that this was not the case at all. It can even be said that Dumbledore found a way for Harry to survive the most. Because in the study of Horcruxes, Ryan discovered that living Horcruxes can be destroyed as long as they kill the carrier of that soul, and the death of Nagini in the original text also illustrates this. If Dumbledore was not really kind, he would be enough to kill Harry. There was no need to make such a big twist. At that time, Dumbledore asked Harry to be taken by Voldemort Awada. Although it was very risky, it was also the only way for Harry to eliminate the Voldemort soul and ensure his survival after his death. And now it is the same. Dumbledore asked Lynn to find a way to remove the soul while keeping Harry safe, just because he found that this way was more able to guarantee Harry's safety. In this respect, his contribution is much larger than letting Harry go to death, and the risk is also greater. But the principal still did it. So, although this world is not perfect, the good side still dominates. Everyone has their own shortcomings, and even will have their own small abacus, but there are more good people. This is why Ryan is willing to participate in this war. Chapter 525, Harry's Trouble. Because Ravenclaw's crown used to be Voldemort's Horcrux, so for security reasons, I can't make your contribution to the public. Dumbledore's face was embarrassed. Of course, wait for us after the victory. I will let everyone know your contribution. It doesn't matter. It's not a sacrifice for victory. Ryan waved his hand and made an indifferent expression. Anyway, this thing brought the principal closer to the principal this time. By the way, he can get one through Dumbledore. A large number of good things that could not be obtained before. This is very worthwhile, and a little nickname is nothing. Not to mention that under such circumstances, this kind of fictitious name would only make Voldemort turn his attention, and it would be better if there was no such fictitious name. I'm taking the liberty to ask, where did you find this crown? Dumbledore opened the drawer and put the crown in and asked straightly. This is important, so I hope you can tell me. There is a place for students to hide things in the request room. Ryan felt that this did not need to be hidden from the principal, but the process of finding this thing would have to be changed a little bit. He could not tell the principal that I knew that this thing was here. Don't I get a magic item recycling at Sirius's house before? So after returning to school, I started to look for enough raw materials in the school after the batch of things I got at Sirius's house was used up. When I was thinking of looking for waste products that everyone couldn't use, I saw a huge debris warehouse in the request room. There were a lot of things that the students had hidden there. This helped me a lot. Many of the materials in the latest batch of bracelets come from here. Lean paused here. Dumbledore smiled. It's okay. The things hidden there are not needed by everyone. It's a good thing for you to recycle it. This is also my incomplete thinking before. I didn't consider you even if you have money. It's also difficult to buy what you need. You can tell me directly if you are short of something, and I'll help you find it. Then thank you, Ryan said with a smile. When I was looking for something inside, I saw this crown on the head of a bust of an old wizard. At that time, the crown looked rusty and unremarkable. I just thought that the gem above might be valuable. When I went to get it, there was a sound in the crown that made me take it. I found it wrong. Afterwards, I put this in a lead box and took it back to study it slowly. I thought it might be a Horcrux, so I used it to test the removal of the residual soul. It didn't succeed until 2 or 3 days ago. You are too risky, Ryan. I don't want you to do this in the future. Dumbledore showed a concerned expression after listening to Ryan's words. You should tell me this kind of thing in advance, and you are not in danger of never seeing a Horcrux. You don't have to worry, Lane said to Dumbledore with a smile. I think my level is facing all kinds of magic and dangerous curses on the Horcrux. At the same time, it can also weaken the temptation of the soul in the Horcrux to me, not to mention that I was blessed by Phoenix when I went to the Heavenly Dynasty in the summer so that my soul can communicate with Hermione. Once I have a tendency to be controlled by a mysterious person, she will notify you as soon as possible. Okay, Dumbledore smiled. I should learn to believe you young people now, but you can come to me later if you encounter any difficulties in the future. The door of my office is always open for you. That's too much, thank you. Ryan sincerely thanked him for something he couldn't buy before, and he could finally start his own work of refining the alchemy stone. After saying a few more words, Ryan said goodbye to Professor Dumbledore and left. When he went downstairs, he just saw Harry walking towards Professor Dumbledore's office. It seemed that he should be preparing for a new lesson about Voldemort. Lane found that after the last Ministry of Magic battle, Dumbledore began to consciously train young people, especially Harry. It seems that in the battle with Voldemort, he realized that he was getting older, and slowly began to be unable to work, feeling that it was time to train the next generation. Harry found Ryan who was going downstairs, and after saying hello to Ryan, he went to the principal's office. Dumbledore had already collected all traces of Ryan's visit by this time, leaving only the meditation basin on the table. After Harry greeted the principal, Dumbledore first talked about the meeting between Harry and the Minister of Magic during the Christmas holiday. Dumbledore was a little touched by Harry's performance, and mentioned that the Ministry of Magic had been trying to figure out what he was doing, and even sent her to follow. So they don't know where you are going yet? Harry asked, hoping to get more information on his curious question. but Dumbledore only looked at him from above the half-moon-shaped lens and smiled. Yeah, they don't know. It's too early to tell you now. I can only say that this matter is very important to defeat Voldemort. Well, let's continue the class next, unless you have other important things. Harry hurriedly overheard the conversation about Snape and Malfoy, but Dumbledore advised Harry not to take this matter seriously, because he thought it was not important. Although Dumbledore's answer made Harry very uncomfortable, he finally chose to watch today's memories at Dumbledore's request. Dumbledore began to introduce Voldemort's outstanding performance after entering school, and also pointed out that Voldemort was already very good at disguising at this time. He even organized a small group of his own and triggered many vicious attacks that could not find evidence. Next, Dumbledore showed the memory of Gunter, Uncle Voldemort. In this memory, he saw Voldemort confirming his identity for the first time. After reading the memory, Dumbledore told Harry that he could confirm that Voldemort had stunned Gunter and killed his father and grandparents with Gunter's wand. Afterwards, he blamed his uncle for a bit of complicated magic, and implanted false memories in his uncle's brain to blame his uncle. At the same time also took away the ancient ring. After Harry and Dumbledore criticized the defects of the Ministry of Magic, Dumbledore solemnly took another bottle from the pocket inside the robe. When Harry noticed that Dumbledore dumped the contents of the bottle were not easy to pour into the meditation basin. It seemed to be a little condensed. Does the memory deteriorate? Harry, this memory is hard to come by, and I think it is the most important one of all the memories I have collected, and of course, perhaps the shortest one. Dumbledore said, we will come back in a moment. Okay, enter the meditation basin again. After a familiar sense of falling, Harry saw a much younger Slughorn in front of him. The most obvious thing was that he was not bald at this time. Looking around, he found himself in Slughorn's office. 6 or 7 boys sat next to Slughorn, all 15 or 16, and the chairs were harder or shorter than him. He hadn't had time to look carefully. A voice came, Sir, is Professor Millis about to retire? Harry found that Tom Riddle, who was formerly speaking when he was young, was also the most handsome one in this house. Tom, I can't tell you this. Slugho shook a frosted finger that he had just pulled out of the jar of pineapple preserves. But I'm curious to know where you got the news. You more than half of the professors at Hogwarts are well informed. Riddle smiled slightly, and the other boys also laughed, throwing admiring glances at him. Slughorn also laughed. You ghost spirit, you can know what you should not know, and you will be careful to make important people. By the way, thank you for your pineapple preserves. You guessed it, this is my favorite. Although I don't know you are. Where do you know this? This time a strange thing happened. The whole room was suddenly shrouded in white fog, and Harry could only see Dumbledore's face beside him. Slughorn's voice sounded in the room, and it was so unnaturally loud. You will make a mistake. www.mplnovel.com kid, remember my words. Then the fog cleared, and Harry saw the golden clock on Slughorn's desk ringing at 11. He began to drive everyone out, but the young Voldemort stayed. Sir, I want to ask you something. Then ask, boy, ask. Sir, I want to ask if you know Horcrux. Once again, the fog was thick. Harry could see neither Slughorn nor Riddle. Only Dumbledore smiled peacefully beside him. Then Slughorn's voice sounded loudly again, just like before. I don't know anything about Horcrux. I won't tell you even if I know it. Go out immediately. Don't let me hear you mention this again. It's confusing. When Harry looked up, Dumbledore looked at Harry. If you don't think it, I'd be surprised. What there was that? Harry said, puzzled. Professor Slughorn has tampered with his own memory. Because he is ashamed of this memory, he wants to tamper with it to make him decent. This is why I don't have to spit the real agent or take the Dementor, because the memory may also be fake. So, for the first time, I will give you homework, Harry. You have to try to make Professor Slughorn expose a true memory, which will undoubtedly be our most critical information. Said that Dumbledore brushed the meditation basin with his hand. This memory is everything, Harry. Without it, we are nothing short of blind.